Hello and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, I interview peak performing innovators in the creative, social impact, and earth conservation spaces who are working to change the world. This episode is brought to you by Brain FM, which combines the best of music and neuroscience to help you relax, focus, meditate, and even sleep. And if you're liking the show, I would love it if you'd buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/IsoldeT. See the show notes for details. And now, let's get on with the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg, back for another really exciting edition of talking about Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way with three amazing artists. They are Megan Vasilis, Alan Fessenden, and Sergio Giovanni. I'm super excited to have them here. This week, we're going to be talking about not chapter 8, but week 8 of the Artist's Way course, called Recovering a Sense of Strength. And if you have just joined this whole process, feel free to go back and start over again. We're going to go through the whole book. You can feel free to go back to the very beginning, 9 weeks ago or so, and listen and start going through the book and listen to the episode each week and think about it and talk about it, either with your friends if you decide to do it as a group, or just thinking about what we talk about as we go through the book. It's been a real journey and a process, and I think each one of us has been changed at least a little bit by going through it. So I'm super excited to welcome Megan, Alan, and Sergio. Y'all, thank you so much for being here.
Isolde.
Thank you, Isolde.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. So I want to jump. I just want to jump right in, and I want to start with this whole notion of recovering a sense of strength. And she says that artists must learn to survive loss. So, like the loss of hope, the loss of time, the loss of money, the loss of self-belief. That we as artists have to learn to survive the loss of those and somehow heal from that loss. What are your thoughts on that? Because to me, it's another way that didn't work, right? When I get down, I remind myself I need to be looking at things differently and how I can change my perspective maybe, rather than going into a place of grief. And I don't know, maybe I'm just in self-denial. I'm not sure, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. Do you think we need to grieve loss if we didn't get something we wanted, or if something wasn't, if a work wasn't accepted into an exhibition, or a publisher rejected it, or whatever it is? Do we need to grieve that loss in order to move forward? What are your thoughts on that? Megan, why don't we start with you?
I have thought a lot about this, and I think for me, I have really had to learn that having that space for that mourning period after a loss is really important for me, because there was a time when I really didn't give myself that space, and I would just immediately jump to, okay, this is going to be rocket fuel, and I'm going to get on my spaceship and I'm going to show them all. And I mean, that's useful. I think that's the energy I want to be moving forward with. But when I wasn't giving myself space to also just acknowledge what had happened and be sad about it, then I would often miss the opportunity to learn. For one thing, like I wouldn't always learn what I needed to learn from that loss. And when I didn't acknowledge the feelings that I had, they would just kind of sit there and unexpressed. And sometimes it would just it would come out in other ways, that I wasn't necessarily expecting or wanting. And I think, I think so. I had something else in my mind, but then it kind of slipped away. So how about you, Sergio?
Let me take a second to think of that. I definitely agree that we shouldn't dismiss our feelings, right? So for me, when it comes to grieving a loss, I think within context, there are moments or things that I lose that are really important to me, or people that I definitely have to grieve in order to try and get to a better place. But when it comes to rejection of art, I'm not sure if that's a whole process. I feel like that's a shorter experience for me, unless it's something that's really important to me. And not that my art isn't important to me, but I guess I haven't gotten to that point where I've shared something big enough Actually, I take that back. When I was releasing music with my band that I was in, guys that are still really close to me, we released some music, and there were some people who were talking smack about us. We had some haters, and that really affected me. That made me even want to stop putting music out.
Hmm.
So
You had a
yeah,
hater? Oh my god.
yeah, we had a group of haters from the hometown, some metalheads, and I knew a few of them. Some of my bandmates went to school with others, and I didn't understand it. And I think it was because we were playing such different music, and also not for nothing. I don't want to be talking smack, but we were playing bigger shows within a year than they were doing in the handful of years or whatever that they were making music. Not to say that we were better or anything like that. I don't like to compare, but fuck them, right? I'm sorry to be the I think this is my first F bomb on the show. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to put that.
Put the
Um,
little explicit thing in. That's
yeah.
right.
Uh, so I take all that back. I did have to grieve that. That was something that was a whole process for me before I was able to be like, yeah, you know what? I don't care. Even if I have haters in the future, then I'm not gonna let it stop me. Which is something I hope is true when I continue to pursue art. How do you feel about this, Alan?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. And I think I found some sort of, as well as ways of thinking about things, because I think she talks about like missing, not getting cast in the part that you wanted, or not getting signed for a book deal or something like that, right? It's like artistic losses that she's talking about. And
Mhm.
I've been also thinking like we don't have like a structured way to grieve these days, like when we lose people in our lives. And sort of there's a funeral and then everyone's just supposed to move on.
Mm.
But we used to have like periods of mourning for people, like depending on the relationships, I guess. Those,
Mm.
and I'm sure there's like some aspects of that are maybe beyond just like acknowledging grief, but it's interesting that we don't really have that in our society anymore. Like there's just this moment of like the funeral, and then just everyone sends some flowers, and then we move on. um and and I found that sort of like, okay, that's sort of came to me. And the other thing, when you were bringing up the subject just now, I started to think of the timing after a play,
Mm.
after you do a performance that you've worked on for a long time, and then you do a few performances and the run is over, and there's this moment of like, what now?
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go? And and I think that makes sense to have that moment. Like I was able to acknowledge that, to be like, there's a depression that comes after doing a show. When the show closes and you put all this work into it and then it's just done, there's this moment of like, oh no, I don't have anything anymore. And I think in that space I was allowed myself to like be in those moments. I could acknowledge that, but I've never thought about it as acknowledging the loss of some achievements, or some almost rands, right? Like, oh, I didn't get this one role in college, and I was later told I was up for it, and I sort of like, I reasoned it out immediately. I was like, well, I guess I wasn't ready, I could have done it at this point.
Mm.
And then in that moment I sort of like stuck myself in this position of not being ready.
Mm.
and and I didn't realize I was doing that, but I think I sort of held on to this feeling of like, oh, well, I'm just not ready. I'm people aren't looking to me to do that. It's not my time. And so I think a lot of times I've sort of backseated myself on my own projects to sort of like support people around me, but also maybe we're working this out in real time, uh because of maybe I felt like I wasn't ready or something. And and then there's been huge artistic losses in my life that I've felt like, well, it's my job to move on from, but I didn't feel like I had the permission, or that I was supposed to be like grieving it, that grieving that relationships lost, or uh opportunities missed, and such like that. And it doesn't mean that I need to wallow in those moments, but the feeling that I can acknowledge those as a loss, and not just a loss, but a moment where I showed up and believed in myself and then got knocked down. And so I think there's value in saying like it's okay to acknowledge those losses. But that's what's coming up for me now. Is Olda, I'll pass it back to you and see how you. I know you said you were struggling with this one, or it's not your favorite. So I'll let you expound on that.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, I agree with all of you that it's okay to acknowledge the loss. I'm right there. Acknowledging that when you want something really badly, absolutely. If you don't get it, if you don't achieve it, you can acknowledge, to me, sort of the road not taken for whatever reason. And to what you were saying, Alan, I want to specifically address. First of all, I agree with you. When I've done shows and it's incredible and everyone's in the pocket and it's so good, and then you close and the next day you're like, holy crap. And it's a depression, because I think the dopamine that you would otherwise like have coursing through your body there's no need for it anymore. And what happens when you get off of dopamine high, your own internal hormones, is depression, right? So I think there is an actual physical response to things being over, to shows being done, or to achieving something big, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, what's next? I'm sitting in my bathrobe on my couch and eating popcorn at 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So it's possible that there is that kind of thing that's happening in those moments. And I personally don't necessarily want to grieve them. I usually go, woohoo, that was incredibly awesome. And then I look for the next project, because I never have a shortage of projects, right? So there's always not just one book I'm working on, but 4 books. So if one book gets done, I'm almost at the point where I'm like, whew, okay, good. If that one didn't work, I'm on to the next one, because Kevin Kelly, I have a cajillion ideas running through my head at any one time, and I'm happy to give them away because there's always going to be more, right? So I don't tend to look at it as I need to grieve the loss of this. I go, this wasn't right for whatever reason. What I was doing was not right for what they wanted. It doesn't mean that it wasn't right. It doesn't mean that I was wrong or in any way bad or in any way deficient. It means that for what they were looking for, I didn't submit in the way that they needed to see it. And I'm going to be jumping up on that particular soapbox probably for the rest of my life. If you want to get something in front of people, you have to give it to them. You have to present it to them in the way they need to see it. And if you don't, then you're probably not going to have as much luck getting to where you want to go. So it's one of those communication things, I think, that Tamsin Webster really outlined beautifully in her book, Find Your Red Thread. But also, I think, it only makes sense. If you're trying to say the sky is blue, but what the person is hearing is tractors are yellow, and you're going, no, the sky is blue. And they keep hearing tractors are yellow, and they're going, I know tractors are yellow. And you're going, no, what I'm saying is the sky is blue. And they can't hear you say that, then you're going to give yourself a headache, right? So that's part of this. The other part, I wanted to sort of address the thing you said about funerals and sort of releasing things. In the Jewish faith, they have what they call sitting Shiva. So people will gather and they need depending on the sect of Judaism, they need a certain number of men or women or whatever, and they all sit together and eat together and sort of honor the person who's passed together for like 10 days or something like that. So there are, sort of funerary rites that we do to honor the passing of something. And I don't think there's anything wrong at all with honoring the passing of a project or a project that didn't come to fruition. There's nothing wrong with it. But the thing that kind of makes me go, wah, is that she calls artistic losses the same as miscarriages. And okay, none of us, as far as I know, has ever been pregnant. So
Yeah, that was wild.
Right. But, so it was, right? So she's like, these are like miscarriages. And I'm like, I've never been pregnant, so I don't really know, but I imagine having a baby growing inside you and then losing that baby would be devastating. And I've had lots of projects die on the vine and pick myself up and found another way, and it was not devastating. So looking at every project that's lost as something that has been torn out of me just feels a little dramatic, and it just doesn't feel as as huge as something like a miscarriage probably does to a woman who loses a baby. So I feel like that there's a little bit of, again, Cameron is really good at putting herself outside of the book, but there are times when you can just tell that there's stuff in there that's very personal to her that she sort of globalizes to include everybody, and I just don't think that's true. So if you're listening to this and you're like, and you read that part and you were like, what? No, it's not like that at all. Please note that you are not alone. There are lots of people probably who think the same way, who are going, the two are different, right? My painting not being accepted into the exhibition is not at all the same as losing a baby. So please note that you are not alone if you were outraged by that. I was out. I was like, no, you cannot equate the death of a project to the death of a baby or an animal. I can't equate that. Thinking about it is equating it to the death of my beloved cat Kimba. I'm still like, no, it's not the same. I will always have a new idea. I will always have another project. So I want to encourage you to remember that a lot of this stuff is what Cameron has through her filters, not necessarily what is true for all artists. Anybody have any thoughts on what I just said?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I completely agree. I understand that as artists, we can feel like a work of art that we produce is like our child, our baby, right? We're giving it to other people. But I thought that was just really poor wording. And in no way do I agree that it's the same as someone having a miscarriage. So
Yeah.
even me, I'm as a man, I and it doesn't matter, right? But that was just offensive even to me.
Yeah.
On a brighter note, I do want to say that I really loved your "Sky is blue, tractor is yellow" comment. That's really deep. That's really deep. It has layers, I think, and that's beautiful. And I also wanted to ask. I hope it's okay. I don't want to do any retreading.
No, it's fine. But I will say, you're fading in and out on your mic. So if you could get closer to your mic, that would be fabulous. Because right now you're kind of going, I can almost be heard, but not quite be heard for a lot of what you're saying.
I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
Let me know if it continues.
This is great.
I just wanted to ask Alan before my takeaway from what he was saying, from when he didn't achieve certain things or he would stop working on other projects, he felt like he would just start supporting other people. So my takeaway from that was, do you all think that rejection and loss creates shadow artists? Alan, did you feel like a shadow artist after some of those
I didn't feel like a shadow artist, but I felt like I needed my opinion validated, and I think I always feel unprepared going into a project, and I end up sometimes not trusting my vision. So I like to have someone's voice or eyes that I do trust work with me. And I think like this was something I haven't really considered myself a shadow artist in a way, but I feel like I've become a stuck artist, or like I've sort of frozen or something like that. But this has been helping, so I don't feel that now. But this is the stuff I've been processing, and this was just something I thought in this moment, that these moments had sort of given me information that I had sort of held on to too long. Like I didn't adjust to them, because I just sort of tried to accept that information rather than to let it affect me emotionally. I was like, well, no, it's done, so what can I do about it, right? And so it didn't translate to me being like, well, that'll never be not ready again. I was just like, I'm not ready, or something like that. It's sort of stuck on me. And
I had a thought about that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm done.
Well, I think I agree with you guys that her equation of an artistic loss to the loss of a baby or a person or an animal, like that's completely inappropriate. That also struck me as really jarring. But what I connected to in what she said is the idea that it can kind of set you back in some way. And I think as we've been talking about it, I suddenly realized that what she's calling mourning, and I think what I experience when I have a loss like that is kind of me working through those negative feelings about myself, like, oh, this means I'm not ready, this means I'm not talented,
Mhm.
in order for me to
Mhm.
turn it into rocket fuel, I have to like work through all those negative stories that I still have in my mind, I think. And I think if you're an artist who's a little bit more secure, who's a little bit further along in that particular journey, that might not be as much of an issue for you. It might be easier to just sort of not internalize that kind of loss and then just move forward more quickly than I can at this point in my journey. So that I'm wondering if she's speaking in her own odd way to people who still feel that way.
Yeah, it's a great question, and and it segues us beautifully into the next part that I wanted to talk about, which is that notion of correct criticism versus incorrect criticism, right? So personally, Megan, I don't know that you would need to be further along or not further along. I think cruel criticism. I think a rejection that is cruel rather than the one that is constructive will set anybody back. It doesn't matter who you are; it'll set you on your heels if someone is cruel versus constructive in how they're reviewing your work, right? Or a rejection letter from a publishing company that's just like, "Wah, wah, sorry, you're not going to be published," is very different than, hey, thanks for submitting. We liked it. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. You maybe want to fix it up and submit it again. Or maybe I can't use it, but somebody else might use it. And here's a name. Those kinds of things. And granted, editors and agents don't have time necessarily to do that. But that's the kind of thing that I think an artist would be benefited by. So it doesn't matter if you are really far along in your career. I imagine that a horrible review of whatever it is you're doing that just trounces you will set you back. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So but let's move on if that's okay. Let's talk about that difference between correct criticism and incorrect criticism. And again, I will say that she's really showing her biases in this chapter. And there's stuff in here that it just makes me go, obviously she had some really horrible experiences, because she again globalizes stuff, and it just makes me go, no, it's not the same, right? So I even literally in my notes I wrote, what, with a bunch of question marks. Why is a teacher given the same status as your parent? Teachers have dozens or hundreds of students every year. That's a lot of burden to put on a teacher. It's not the same as a parental violation, and implying that it is, that a teacher who does not give you the same kind of attention that a parent might when they critique your work or when they give you feedback. You can't equate the two in my mind, right? So to me, teachers are heroes, and the fact that they do what they do is amazing. So I have a lot of trouble with this whole section, but I would like to talk to you all and ask you about your notions of correct criticism versus incorrect criticism. Like, she says that incorrect criticism, that there's no kernel of truth, yet it seems plausible, versus correct criticism of sort of when there's no kernel of truth and it seems plausible, versus the recognition of, that thing has been bothering me and I just couldn't put my finger on it. And that's what she defines as sort of constructive and correct criticism. What are your thoughts on that? Sergio, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I feel like what I was talking about before when I had the haters, that was kind of, maybe you can deem that as incorrect criticism, or the way that Miss Cameron puts it in the book. And I feel like incorrect criticism can be very hurtful, and it can hinder an artist, but it hopefully shouldn't set you back too much or disparage you too much and make you stop. That's easier said than done. And I do feel like, as far as constructive criticism goes, for me, even growing up, sometimes that was even hard to take. It was just like, what? You don't like all of it? What
Right.
does that mean?
Right.
But as I've gotten older, it's necessary, and it's definitely something I take into consideration. And there have definitely been, moments where someone has said something, maybe this sentence runs on a little too much, or it doesn't flow as right, and I'll definitely take that in, and I'll rewrite. And a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but there are many times where I'll agree with them right off the bat. It's like, I knew something was funky about this paragraph or this part. Thank you for saying that, and I'm really grateful for that. And for example, I'm really grateful for this group and meeting you all, because you give the best feedback and the best criticism that I feel like Miss Cameron would feel is the most correct criticism you can get, if that makes sense. Alan, welcome back. Thank you so much. For
Thank you. I
joining
think
us
I
again.
lost internet there. I'm sorry.
No, that's
No
great. You're
problem.
back. Yay. So
I'm
you
back.
yes, and you are right in time to chat about what you think the difference between correct criticism and incorrect criticism is. What we were talking about is that there's no kernel of truth to incorrect criticism, yet it seems plausible, versus correct criticism brings with it a sort of a glimmer of recognition, as if you knew something was not quite right with this part of it or whatever. You didn't maybe have a way to put your finger on it, but all of a sudden there's something that magnifies it for you because it is correct and that's something that you can fix. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I love correct criticism because I that sounds familiar to me, like recognizing something that's helpful to you, a place where you can work, from where you can focus your energies. And then like incorrect criticism, it just sounds like that moment where someone's beating you down just to like let you know that they could do something better than you, or that they have more experience than you. It's just like, okay. But how can I learn from you? Like, what do you want to teach me? What do you want to, like, we don't think about criticism necessarily as a teaching tool, although I know that probably teachers do. But in general, criticism is criticism. It's bad. So good criticism or objective criticism, something that you can see that sort of like helps you focus your work, or puts you further down your path of where you're trying to go. That's like gives you some steps to take. That's helpful. I think that's going to be really important. And I think that's a skill to give that criticism, and you need to really have awareness when you're giving criticism of like, A, does the person want criticism, and B, is what you're doing helpful for them or hurtful. And how you navigate what people give to you, that's a different thing.
Sure, and your point is well taken. I think that in our writing group, for example, and if you're listening to this and you want to start a group of some sort, that's one of the best ways to do it is search around in your community and ask people who wants to join something. Let's say you want to do a drawing group or a music group or do an art salon every Friday night like I used to in back when I lived in Maryland. One of the things that you can do, and this is what we do in our writing group, is when you present something for feedback, one of the things you need to do is tell everybody what feedback you want, right? Because if you're just ready to only get supportive feedback, like all I want to know is what you like about it, I am not ready to hear anything that needs work yet because it's too new, too fragile, too whatever. Great. If you're ready to have it more substantively critiqued, then you can say that. And the hard part I think about that is that you have to know yourself well enough to know what you actually want versus then what you think you're supposed to want. And those are two very different things sometimes. So be aware of that. Megan, you haven't had a chance to go on this one. What are your thoughts on it?
I definitely think for me, it really depends on what stage the work itself is in. Like, I think everyone has their own process, and over many years of writing and doing creative work, I realized that once I've gotten the work to the point where it's gone as far as I can take it, that's when I not only want feedback, I crave it. I think once you're out of college and out of like that kind of supportive environment, it can be really, really difficult to find that, and then I really relish getting those critical comments because I want to know how I can make it better. I probably know that it's not perfect yet, or, not that we should strive for perfection, but I mean, I know that it's not quite ready. And I want someone who kind of understands what I'm trying to do to tell me how I might fix it. But when a project is at a really early stage, like when I'm say in the middle of a rough draft, I find that if I show it to someone too early, it is like she uses the word seedling in here. So she calls us like young artists are seedlings. I think of my works kind of as seedlings. You know, when they're too small, criticism might just like kind of crush the idea for me, and then it's really hard for me to sort of pick up the pieces and go back to it. It really has to be like a yearling, you know, like a bigger little, like a small tree size plant. To just extend that metaphor.
For sure.
It has to be bigger and stronger before I can take that kind of criticism. And then, you know, it's not anywhere near a traumatic experience to get feedback. I want that feedback because I probably know that I can't get it to where I want to be on my own. And that's it's precious to me when someone is willing to help me, you know?
I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, again, that is a lot of self-awareness. That's what I heard you talking about. Like, oh, this work is advanced enough now to where it's not a seedling anymore. Now it's a yearling. So it can withstand more, you know, inclement weather, if you will, right? So that yearling has sturdier roots. You have something there that you are ready to have
Wow.
talked about more and critiqued more and get feedback on. So there's something there that I think that we can all use from what you said, Megan. Your point is very well taken. That what if you were, instead of treating your art like something ephemeral, what if you were to say, okay, what I'm doing is I'm planting a seedling and I'm going to tend it so that it gets really solid roots, and then it can withstand critique without a problem, but still keep growing and still flower and still do all the extending of the metaphor that it wants to. So yeah, your point is well taken. And yet critique by teachers it's tough. Like when we critique each other's work, we're colleagues, we're cohorts. There's nobody who is more advanced. There's nobody who's a teacher and everybody else is a student. And this is tough in this chapter. And if you're reading this again, I apologize if this was challenging for you to read, because she compares academics, some teachers, to emotional incest, which is just, you know, she obviously has some problems with old teachers and mentors, but she's writing some horrible stuff here. So it's really, and I understand and I apologize. No, I don't apologize. I'm sorry if it triggered you. I apologize for that, because we're going, you should do this book. And there's some stuff in here that's very difficult to read. And again, I apologize. You know, criticism of your art is not covert sexual harassment. And honestly, if it is, there's a lot more wrong than the teacher critiquing your art. So please bear that in mind, that there's something that, again, is her filters, not necessarily the truth globally for everybody. So when we're talking about some of this, and, you know, she says her writing professors were terrified of their students writing because they were block creatives themselves, and the students they had such promise, and so all they wanted to do was wreck the students' lives. And I'm like, oh, this is bad. This is bad. I don't think that it's universal, and she kind of makes it seem like it might be. So be aware that not all teachers do this. In fact, the vast majority of teachers don't. However, with you, Sergio, Megan, and Alan, I do want to ask how you feel about her thoughts on academia. She seems to say that some professors are creative monsters, and others are hostile to their students, and others fail to provide encouragement. It just seems to me that there's a little bit of a, like, let me hold your hand, you poor little artist baby. But if you want to create, I think you shouldn't let anybody stop you, right? Nothing and no one should stop you from creating. So how much of this do we give credence, as far as that the professor will go, you know, you shouldn't be an artist, and the artist kind of goes, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't be an artist, versus going, you know what, I'm going to show you, and you're going to see my art hanging in the Louvre. So what are your thoughts on that? Let's start with Alan.
Oh, I have some thoughts.
I thought you might.
So I think to wholeheartedly discount this, her account of academia and sort of professors in the artistic fields as abusive or sometimes predatory would be dismiss a ton of stories that exist out there already, of how people have reacted. And like I'm thinking about there's clown teachers out there. There's recently an old friend of mine is a clown, and she wrote an article about another clown teacher who is known to be quite abusive and really attacks the artist, the clowns as they develop. And there is a style of teaching that is, embraces that aspect. But I had a teacher who set up and was like, told me there's the I forget, it was like, I want to say a white clown, but or the master clown, the sort of circus leader who would direct the other clowns at a show.
Mhm.
And that clown is by nature very abusive, but it wasn't the professor, right? So when I taught clown, and I took what I learned from my teacher Giovanni Fusetti, there would be a voice where I would sort of push people in this way, but I tried to I was trying to be clear with them that there's a voice and that I was pushing them, but I didn't ever try to tear any artist down so that they were breaking down to like not be available. I tried to push them to do more or push themselves more. And that's one aspect of it. But I grew up in high school hearing about a casting couch and in the theater world, and everyone thought it was just this joke. And then suddenly we're like finally I guess it was 2016, dealing with Harvey Weinstein and all these the Me Too movement, and going around taking out people who are living in these artistic communities. And I know people are upset about that, or like it's too much or whatever, but like there's a point of vulnerability when you're trying to be an artist, when you're reaching out to be an artist, and people start their artistic careers. So they leave high school and join these theater schools where these men have been teaching for years and are masters of their crafts. And these women too, of course, that these professors have been around for 20, 30 years and have credits to their names that these kids can only dream of. It's a very vulnerable position, and some of these people are already resisting pushback to being an artist from family or friends or loved ones, of different sorts, or financial hardships to get them the training that they want, because that's not or cheap, or just trying to live in New York. There's a lot of aspects to pursuing a creative career that put yourself in a very vulnerable point. And so you do have to be aware of artists who have been doing it so long that they just crush people sort of almost for sport, and I'm not saying this is like the norm. It's not the norm, but to say that it doesn't exist would be like, it's just this is an experience that she's telling us exists, and it's an experience that we've heard about that exists. So I think it has to be acknowledged and be warned about that. There's people that will crush you artistically so that they feel better about themselves, or they see you doing something better. It's not unknown. It's not foreign to think that there's a concept. And people who are the teachers, I'm not coming for teachers. I love what teachers do, but I'm like, to say that there aren't people sort of that will do that, and not consciously. Some of them, they'll just do it because they're bitter or jealous, or they've stuck. Like there's something in there that just they want to poke at you, and they may not get you as old. You'll maybe just keep going, and you may be able to just keep going. But like some people will not be able to just keep going like that.
Oh, absolutely. I totally get it. And my point, I think, is, and I'm not going to backstep, but I will say that, yeah, I'm sure it happens. There's no question. But she, again, to me, the issue here was that she was globalizing it, and she was saying that it happens, all the time. And that's the thing that kind of made me go, I have trouble with this, because I don't think it happens all the time. I don't think it happens to every artist. I don't think every
Mhm.
teacher is like that. And so we have to be very careful, I think, in looking at this and deciding for ourselves who we're going to trust, right? So I don't study with someone until I have talked to other people who have studied with that someone, for example, right? So I don't go, oh, I'm going to study with Professor X. That's a little shout out to you, Sergio. I'm going to study with
Hey.
Professor X without talking to people who've already studied with Professor X, right? So we live in the age of the internet. We can Google everybody. We can find things out and really learn this stuff. But I have trouble with, and again, she wrote the book a long time ago. I have trouble with her going, you know, teachers are going to be creative monsters. They're going to try and cut you off the knees. Not every teacher, you know, not every teacher does it. Not every teacher doesn't do it. You have to do your research. And unfortunately, you have to be aware of all of that as it goes. So I kind of wanted to say that because, yeah, absolutely. It has happened. And I know people it's happened to, but to globalize it and say that it's the norm, I will disagree with. Megan, why don't we go to you next? What are your thoughts on this?
I really think there's a difference between, you know, receiving critical feedback and being in an abusive situation with a bad teacher. I mean, I
Right.
had an experience in college where a teacher who became my mentor gave me really challenging feedback all the time. And I learned so much from her. You know, I learned more from her than I learned from anyone because she was never delivering that feedback to destroy me. You know, she wanted me to succeed. She wanted me, she believed that I could be smarter and better, that my ideas could evolve. She believed that I could be better than I ever thought I could. Like I had a bigger vision for my life because of her, because she respected me enough to give me that really challenging critical feedback constantly. You know, she never let me rest on my laurels.
Mm.
And I also had, you know, teachers who were definitely like just out there to like crush a young person's dreams. And I think like if you're, I think different people react to that kind of thing differently. Some people like me are made of piss and vinegar and are going to take that and go like, well, fuck you. I'm going to succeed no matter what. But I think other people who still deserve to be creative, who still have a creative inside of them, would just be very discouraged by that. And I think even though I had that attitude when I had you know, feedback that was not as constructive, I still in my own way like used it to limit myself later. And I think it was because of the place in life I was. That's one thing that she doesn't really clarify in this chapter. I think it really, not only do people's personalities vary and how they might internalize that kind of thing, but I think it also depends on like what stage of life you're in. Like now, I mean, I think I've grown up and evolved to the point where I would react very differently to that than I did when I was 19. And, you know, a teacher actually told me, you're so talented, but there's, you know, the world doesn't want your gift. So, you know, you might as well just go flip burgers. I mean, and that, I mean, I didn't know about the world then, you know, I didn't have any evidence to counteract that with in my own mind. So, I mean, I believed him, you know, I thought, well, he's just telling me an ugly truth. And that kind of affected how I then approached a lot of aspects of how I even viewed my own potential as a creative, you know. And yeah, so I think there's a difference that she's not necessarily acknowledging here.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, she's writing through her filters, and that's a lot of what this is, right? So we have to take what she says and filter it through our own bullshit detectors, if you will. Sergio, what about your thoughts on this?
I'm not a. I want to say first that I'm definitely not a fan of blanket statements, if you will, which I feel like Julia Cameron does a lot in this book. So I agree with a lot of what Isolde is saying. I also appreciate the Prof X shout out. That was cool. I wanted to say as well that like with Alan, I agree that it exists. Not all teachers or mentors are out there doing that, but it does exist. I've seen it. I've even worked alongside some teachers that did things like that, even with young children, which is just awful. but that's not all teachers. Definitely not. So I would hate to generalize just all professors as being these kind of malicious people. So the question for me becomes, how would I let it affect me? And in that aspect, I've had a few teachers in my past that definitely helped influence who I am and the things I'll pursue, or the things I'm pursuing rather. But I don't think at this point in my life I would let anyone, or someone in that role rather, stop me from pursuing these things, even if they told me it wasn't any good. I can definitely understand though when you're younger that kind of that would hit different. So I feel really bad when Megan mentioned that the professor told her that. I remember she said that, I think, in one of the early episodes of the series, and I remember that really struck me as just being so disheartening. So I'm so happy to hear that she said fuck him and kept pursuing her creative efforts and is now here talking to us.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Sophia.
I'm sorry. I feel like there's too many F bombs now. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
no,
getting wild
no.
over here.
We're putting the explicit little thingy on. I've already done it, so we're good to go. Yeah, and as long as we have that little explicit thingy, you know what you're getting into when you click play. So, yeah, and it is interesting. You know, you all make me think of when I was a senior in college. I took a Shakespeare and production seminar, senior seminar. And it was actually a graduate level seminar and taught by a really cool guy. He gave us great instruction. I learned a lot. And I asked him at one point, I said, I need you to be fiercely honest with me. Do you think I have what it takes to be a full-time actor? And he said, you know, I really like what you do, but you don't have what it takes. And I thought about it for a second and I went, what makes you say that? And he goes, frankly, you have too many other interests. You just don't want it enough. And I went,
Wow.
yeah, you are totally right. And it was so freeing because I love the theater. Musical theater is my life. I love it. And yet he was absolutely right. I did not have what it took because I ultimately wasn't willing to do the work that it was going to take. I mean, and he saw it. And I was so grateful to him that he was willing to be honest with me because he could have blown smoke up my skirt. He could have been like, oh, yeah, you know, totally. So Barry Boyd, if you're out there, I love you for this. I have a feeling he's been dead a long time. But I was so grateful to him that he was willing to be honest with me. And he didn't crush my dream. It was one of those correct criticisms in that it made me go, yeah, absolutely. I recognize that for the truth it is. So it depends, I guess, on where you are and whether or not they're being honest with you in the way you need to hear it. So let's talk about this notion of professors and intellectualism. She says that intellectualism runs counter to the creative impulse. So to be an artist, to become overly cerebral is to become crippled. I personally disagree, but again, I have so many issues. But you know, to me, she's conflating intellectuals with critics. But I wanted to get your thought on that notion. Is intellectualism innately counter to the creative impulse? And if so, why? And if not, why? Alan, why don't we start with you?
Oh, I was afraid you would pick me first.
Oh no.
No. I'm trying to figure out where she used that and what sort of context.
It was all about the academia. That was the section that she was talking about it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So she's sort of talking about the over analytical thing of aspect of it. And what's the question? Is it the death of creativity?
Does it run counter to the creative impulse? In other words, is intellectualism, is thinking it through or being, quote, overly cerebral, as she put it, going to cripple an artist?
Right. So I think like it's one of those statements where it could be something, it could be a trap for certain individuals, but certain artists may thrive sort of analyzing everything they're doing at the same time they're doing it, which is what it sort of sounds like to me. And, you know, my mind starts to visualize when I'm working on a project and bigger. But if I go around thinking about how is it going to get done or what's the process to do it, or is it worth doing, or what's the absolute meaning of it and what's this song I'm trying to convey, I'll get the song of the piece. I'll get stuck trying to be like smarter than I am. I'll be trying to figure out the trick. I went to see was it Sleep No More, where you wear the mask and everything, you walk
Mm-hmm.
around the building.
Mm-hmm.
And I was obsessed with figuring it out. I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna figure this out. And I'm not even a puzzle person, but I was like, I'm gonna do this the best way. And I just walked through every room trying to figure it out, and I think I missed most of the show. And I was like, oh, I was like, shoot, I think I did that wrong. And it's because I wanted to do it right. I think I was like so focused on getting it right, and I don't think that that's the same thing as intellectualism, but I feel like they're related, like sort of analyzing something to have the best opinion about it or have the best viewpoint of it, so that you can say, I'm right, I'm the one who thought this, I'm first, like this is my idea. But also it's a great way to tear down other artists if you sort of overanalyze what they do. And if you're just doing that, it's also another trap that you can fall into to disconnect your artist self and fall into your intellectualism. But why don't we see what Megan thinks about this? How do you think intellectualism plays into your artistic endeavors, and can it kill your creativity?
I don't agree with the binary she sets up. I think she sort of writes about this as if it's two opposing camps, and if you're intellectual, if you're thinking about what you're working on, then you're gonna kill like the creative muse somehow. That just feels really simplistic to me. But I do think that there is a level at which, if you overthink your work, then you do sort of, well, for me, I think I can only really speak for myself. I've found that if I do have a tendency to kind of not hyper intellectualize, but overthink things as I'm working on them. And when I do that too much, it does sort of kill the story in a way, because I'm not giving my own, like, I'm not trusting my own creative voice enough. And I think there's a balance point there that each creative person kind of has to figure out for themselves. Where is that line? What's too much and what's too little? And I think it's taken me a long time, but I am starting to figure out now where that is for me. And I never really thought about it in those terms before, but when I sort of can allow myself the space to just not be intellectual about my work, to just sort of write to my own voice within certain constraints, intellectual constraints specifically, that's when I really do my best work. When I have a little bit of kind of like an intellectual framework around what I'm doing. Like what I'll do when I'm writing, when I'm rough drafting a lot of times, is that I will, before I stop writing, I will like sketch out the next scene I'm going to write. And then, usually the next day when I'm waking up, like I'll already have done that intellectual work. I'll know what has to happen in the scene. And then I can sort of let like the emotions of the scene come out in my writing. And if the characters kind of want to do their own thing, I can decide in the moment, like, oh, is this a direction I want to go in? Or is this not working with the story I actually want to tell on that higher intellectual level? When I first started writing when I was really young, I only wrote on that, emotional creative level. And my stories just went nowhere. They meandered. There wasn't a plot. There wasn't a structure. There was I didn't know how to pull everything together into a complete whole. But when I also went through a really long phase where I only wrote intellectually, I would write like 30,000 word long outlines because I wanted to like outthink any mistake I could possibly make. And that also didn't work for me because I was thinking in extremes. No matter which extreme I was working from, I was kind of smothering the story. So I think she's writing about it in this kind of simplistic way, and I feel like for most people there's some middle ground, and it's probably different for everyone, and that's kind of what you need to figure out for yourself.
Totally. Sergio, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, as far as what Miss Cameron says about that and what we're talking about, frankly, I don't agree with with the statement or how she feels. It felt to me like she was saying that you couldn't be both, even an
Mm,
intellectual and a creative, which of course you can be. But with that being said, I do agree that if you overanalyze your process every time, that it can create issues. How do you feel about this, Isolde?
yeah, I'm more in your camp, Sergio. I think she's
Hmm.
conflating intellectuals with critics. You know, that they will inevitably be critical or evaluative of any creative work. But I have to assess my art. I have to assess what I create. Will it work to my eyes? Will its design and composition work? Or will it feel wrong somehow because proportions are off? To make sure that that isn't the case, I need to evaluate somewhere, at least while I'm in process. So that's one of those things that, to me, I love being able to evaluate it. Now, do I evaluate? Oh, I'm doing that year long art project where I'm doing an art piece a day. Do I
Hmm.
stop and evaluate every single line right after I've made it? Of course not. But one of the things, and this is something that as I mentioned to you all in our meeting the other day, one of the things that I'm super grateful for is the undo. And the reason I'm super grateful to the undo is because I try it and I'm allowed to be more bold because I'm able to undo. And maybe that's cheating, and I don't care if it's cheating. I'm happy with that. And the same thing for most of us. If you're a writer and you're writing on a notebook, you can erase, you can do whiteout, you can use your computer and hit delete, right? For me, the point is to try everything and then see, right? And I don't remember if I said this, Flaubert's amazing quote that I have sort of paraphrased and is now my banner call. And what he said was, be regular and orderly in your life so that, like the bourgeoisie, that's right, be regular and orderly in your life like the bourgeoisie so that you can be violent and original in your work. And I sort of transposed that a little bit, or not transposed, paraphrased. I said, be orderly in your life so that you can be wild and original in your work, right? So to me, what's really cool about being able to evaluate is that you do bring a sense of order, and that's okay, because then you can really jump into the wild and the original in your art and be cool with it, and then evaluate it and go, yeah, that line doesn't work, I'm going to move it, I'm going to get rid of it, I'm going to do whatever, so that I can then push forward into the next thing. So that's the way I look at this. So let us move on, because once I get on this topic, I will not stop. How do you all feel about nascent artists being described as so fragile like she describes them? How true do you believe that is? Sergio, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I feel that there is something she says about where she almost equates us to being like children, or she does equate us to being like children, but almost
Mm-hmm.
like a baby who needs
Mm-hmm.
a lullaby. And I just really didn't agree with that
Mm.
statement. It made me feel, it felt kind of condescending in a way.
Right.
And
Infantilizing.
yeah, and I'm sorry, this isn't the bash on the artist way episode, listener, I promise. But that's just how I felt about that, and it kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Megan, how did you feel about
I think that it kind of, again, I feel like it sort of depends on what part of the journey you're in. If you're still a really
it?
new artist who really needs that level of encouragement. I mean, I think her equating it to like being a baby and needing mommying, I mean, I think that is taking it a little bit far for me. But I do think that when you're really young, when you're a very new artist, you do need more nurturing than you need necessarily intellectualism or criticism, I
Mm,
think. And I think that what she's getting at is that when you're moving past a difficulty or some kind of letdown, it can really help move past that if you take care of yourself. And that's a skill I know I really had to learn, both as a creative and just as a person. Like, you really have to know how to how to self-soothe your way out of a kind of a bad mood, or even, yeah, just moving past those letdowns in life. And it's more effective for me to find ways to kind of use more self-care, implement more self-care into my life than it is to just punish myself for feeling bad. So yeah, again, I think she's like taking that idea really to a really dramatic extreme, but on principle, I don't disagree with it. I think we do need to take care of ourselves as artists, because a lot of times nobody else is going to, like we have to be able to encourage ourselves and nurture ourselves, whether we're disappointed or happy about something. Like we have to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. You have to look out for yourself as an artist. And so I didn't have this problem with this passage. I thought it reminds me of Megan, your little seedling. I mean, the seedling metaphor and growing them into trees. And if that can be extrapolated from the projects to ourselves as artists, I mean, the book is full of examples where someone got stuck because someone didn't get the review from their book, or their book didn't get submitted, and somebody else got stuck because someone told them they were ugly, whatever. Like there's a lot of reasons that we can get stuck. And I think there's artists that just keep moving on and keep going on and like, well, I'm not going to be stopped. I'm going to let that push me. And that's great. But we as people who are asking people to do this book and take care of themselves and say, like, we think this is an interesting journey to go on, where you sort of release your artist that you've had stuck inside you. And I think we're coming from a lot of different, just the four of us are coming from such different perspectives, that there's so many other people who are way sort of further behind us and sort of on their journey, where they're just starting out, or they're just trying to like creep out of their 40-year-old tech job that they were stuck into for so long, and that they had their good times, but now they're trying to be like, well, maybe I can make music, or I can paint again, or something like that. And you think about how easy it would be to deter someone like that from taking that chance by being like, oh, that's a dumb thing to do. And I feel like someone just told the story, maybe it was earlier, but like but there's like you can really shut someone down in those situations. Now if you're not like being like, hey, this might not be the best fit, but maybe what I really see in you is this artistic pursuit that you've sort of done before, but you haven't gone back to. Like maybe that's a different thing than just being like, it's not a good time to become a musician, a street musician. Like now's not the time. It's like, well, okay, like you know what? Conventional wisdom agrees with you. So shut it down, kill my dream, because I wasn't I wasn't really sold on it anyway. I was afraid of it, and I've been afraid of it. And so when we sort of dismiss this idea that artists are fragile creatures, and then we do this book for 8 weeks to be like, let's unleash that artist that's been that's had difficulties showing up in ways. And I know that you guys are all working on stuff and being creative, and I'm being creative, and I've done a lot of creative stuff, but that's the people we're saying, like, we're doing this work to sort of invest in ourselves in that way, and we're supporting each other, and we're saying like, we're showing up for each other. And that makes this job a lot easier of taking care of ourselves, because we have each other to do that, and we look out and we check in with each other. And so it's very easy for me to think like, yeah, baby, artists are a little like, can be fragile a little bit, to reach out and be smacked by what are you doing? You're so crazy. You're why are you putting all this stuff on the internet all of a sudden? This is not you. Are you okay? You know, like what? Or what is this sudden? You're not busy. You're so busy. You can't be around. What's so important? What are you doing? Like, well, who do you think you are? You know, there's just,
Mm.
I'm not saying it should stop people. I'm not
Mhm.
saying people should stop, but I'm saying the reality is that not everyone is built built to just steamroll through that stuff. And not
Yeah.
everyone hasn't built themselves up to be prepared to be hit like that, or knows that that hit is coming. And when that hit comes and sort of says to you, no, no, no more, and you feel like you need to believe that, that's tough. And if you don't have people around you going like, that's bullshit, you can move through this. It may take you a little while to figure that out again.
I definitely agree, Alan. And can I just say that I really appreciate hearing you and Megan talk about it and giving me definitely a different perspective on the things she was saying, because the way you two have put it, I can agree. And just you bringing up the seedling yearling metaphor that Megan was talking about earlier, really puts it in that perspective for me. So I completely agree. So I appreciate you two sharing. And can I just say that the synchronicity is real during this process, because I was just saying earlier today to someone about the importance of planting roots and conditioning them so that it grows into something beautiful, like a beautiful garden or a tree. So this is just really resonating with me, and I appreciate just hearing everyone's insight every week.
Nice, me too. Thanks, Sergio.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think honestly, your points are all very well taken, and it's, I guess the way I look at it is, who the hell has power like that, right? Like, how much power do you want to give to someone who could dissuade you? You know, who gave them that power? To me, when I hear that, when I hear somebody else poo-pooed somebody else's work or whatever, you know, take that as you will. I want to take that person and kind of, you know, mentally shake them a little and go, first of all, it's none of your business if they want to go, you know, dance burlesque. It's none of your business. If you can't support them, off you go. But at the same time, intent has a real place here, right? If your intention is to help, then maybe your words will be colored by that. Or maybe you can talk to the artist and go, hey, I'm trying to help. And again, what I said earlier about self-awareness is so important. You, as the critiquer, the critic, have to go, how much of this is about me, right? How much of this is about my fears? How much of this is about my concerns and my insecurities, and has nothing to do with the person whose work I'm critiquing or poo-pooing? That's really hard too, right? So we're all in this position of always having to either say something that could potentially be damaging, hopefully isn't, but potentially could be, or shutting the hell up, right? So we have to sort of remember that part of it, is that the person doing the critiquing has a responsibility here to know themselves, just like the artist has a certain amount of responsibility to know themselves. We are required, if you're going to go out there and you're going to do it, you're required to at least know yourself some. And one of the things that she says that kind of made me go, she said, a lack of audacity might cripple artists who are far more superior than those who get fame. And I just lost it on that, right? Because I'm like, it feels just like a little bit of excuse making there. It feels a little bit sour grapesy, because yeah, the people who have the audacity to put their stuff out there and go, this is me world, this is my art, it might hit with people, it might not, but they're just out there and doing it. And yeah, they might get great fame and might not be as great a whatever, a great an actor, great a writer, great an artist, great a whatever, as someone who plays in their bedroom, right? Who only writes things that no one will read, who only plays electric guitar with their headphones on, who only paints things and then paints over the canvas and paints more, and no one ever sees their work, right? So how do we deal with that? Like, I have a dear friend, my friend Al Petaway is a Grammy Award winning guitarist, and it was really interesting. He was telling a story about he does Celtic fingerstyle guitar, very complicated guitar pieces, beautiful work. And he and his partner slash wife, Amy, do guitar duets all the time. And at a show, he said, this gentleman came up to him and he was like, "Hey, I'm a guitarist too, and this one piece, Mariposa, whatever." He goes, "I've been learning Mariposa, but I'm just having trouble with this one section. I don't know how your fingers can do it all." And Al is like, "Well, you play." So he gives the guy the guitar, and the guy takes the guitar, and Al's watching him, and he goes, "This is the section I'm having trouble with." And he's playing it, and he's like, "This is where I need like another 4 fingers." And Al goes, "Okay, let me stop you right there. Because what you've been doing is playing both parts, Amy's and mine, at the same time." Right. And he's like, "There's no way you should be able." He's like, "You were playing both our guitar parts, and there was a multi-track recording, so multiple times, and you were trying to play it all at the exact same time." And he's like, "First of all, the fact that you could do it at all was amazing.
Impressive.
It blew his mind." Right, exactly. And he's like, "No, you should not be able to play both parts. This is my part," and he plays it. "This is Amy's part." And the guy's like, "Oh." And Al said, he's one of the best guitarists I have ever heard. But in his mind, he's a guy who plays in his bedroom. He's not necessarily a guy who's like out there. He's not gigging. He's just, he loves music. He loves the guitar, and he might be one of the best guitarists the world has ever seen. Only the world has never seen him. So, and that's nobody's fault, right? If he doesn't choose to go out and gig, he doesn't choose to go out and gig. It has to be okay to also be that kind of artist, because if you're putting your stuff out there to be critiqued, that means you're putting it out for the world to see. And inevitably, I think somebody's going to critique it. Somebody's going to poo-poo it. Somebody's going to love it, whatever. And it's just like with my Amazon reviews for my books. Here's what I do for my Amazon reviews for my books and my music. I completely discount the 5-star reviews, and I completely discount the 1-star reviews. They're not, it's very lovely if people give me a 5-star review, but it's not as meaningful as someone who's going, "Here's what worked and here's what didn't work." I want to hear both. Right. But the, "Oh my God, I love Isolde, she's amazing," it's very sweet, but it's not necessarily substantive. And someone who goes, "You suck," isn't giving me anything to work with either. So just like with Al, seeing this wonderful guy playing both guitar parts, both very complicated guitar parts all at the same time, it blew us away when he was talking about it. But Al was like, "Yeah, it blew me away watching him do this." He's like, "I would never have imagined this could be done." And he's not out there to gig. He's just loving the music. And I think if you want to be that kind of an artist who is brilliant at what you do, who are the best at what you do that you can be, that it's perfectly okay to not put your stuff out there to be critiqued, to not put it out there to be published, to not put it out there to be evaluated or seen by anybody. You've got to be okay with that if that's what you want, and so do the rest of us. And I think it's okay to do that. What are your thoughts on that? Sergio, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I just want to say that sounds like a really neat story, and that sounds very impressive that he was able, or almost able, to play both parts or all the parts together.
Yeah, amazing. If you heard Al and Amy stuff, you'd be like, "That doesn't sound possible. Holy crap." So anyway, go on, please.
Yes, please, after we're done here, if you can share a link, that would be great.
I will.
I also want to say a quick shout out to Isolde and her talent, because she shared some music that was amazing, and she also has some very impressive finger skills when it comes to the guitar.
You're very sweet. Thank you.
I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm sorry, can you the question again?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the notion that a lack of audacity might cripple artists who are far superior than those who get fame? What do you think about that? Is that cool? Is it okay to have no fame? Is it necessary to have audacity? What are your thoughts?
See, I knew I completely agreed with what you're saying. Yeah, I feel like you don't need that. It depends on who you are and what you want to achieve, the kind of person, the kind of things you want to do. I remember for me, specifically when I was younger, I was very into acting. I'm still into acting, and I was in different plays and shows. And that was something that I thought about doing. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that I'd rather be behind the scenes. I'd rather be the person who wrote the story that the other actors are in and portraying. So for me, I wouldn't need that kind of fame where everyone knows my name. Feel like I'm singing the Cheers.
I know,
theme
and
song.
I immediately was like, where everybody knows your name.
Hey, shout out Boston, shout out Cheers. Yeah, so that's how I feel about it. Alan, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, it just reminded me that it resonated with me. It's something I've thought about before because I've seen people who I think are less talented than other people I know. But I know that they do the work and they put themselves out there. So that to me it was like that's what this is about. It's like if you want more, you have to work for it rather than saying like, why does that person have it when they're not when I don't think they're as talented as me or whatever. When I know more talented people than that person, but all they do is mics in a Brooklyn cellar sometime, you know, like why aren't those people on stage or why aren't those people getting deals? And it's like, well, those people aren't doing that work. And it's an important thing. It was important for me to realize that like you need to also do that work. And that's not the fun work. It's not the artistic work. It's the stuff that puts you out there and knocks on doors and gets people to know that that's what you want to do. And so I didn't think it was about like, if you're not famous, you're not an artist. It was, but if you're not famous and you want to be famous and you think you're a better artist than the people who are famous, figure out what they're doing because they're doing stuff that you're not doing. It's not just about not being seen. Like you might get lucky and play in some Miami cafe one day and someone will just like, wow, that's gotta have this musician because they're the best in Miami. And I've never heard. That's the dream. But you know, maybe you'll find out where people are going to hang out and listen to music in New York and where people go to scout music. And maybe you'll put stuff on TikTok because people are scouting TikTok for music to blow up on, right? Like they're trying to find out where people are. And if you're not there, you can't be like, well, why is that person getting it and I'm not? So that's to me, it's a reminder, like you have to do this other side of the you have to treat your work as valuable and push it and put it out there so that people can see it and make sure that they know about it. That's your job. If you want to be recognized, if you want your art to be seen. Megan, I'm just going to pass it off like that. Megan.
I have lots of thoughts. I think this for me, this comes down to the difference between creative brain and marketing brain. When you're kind of working from that pure creative place and that's your only goal, then the only person involved is you and the only audience for the work is you. And I think if that's your goal, then you don't necessarily need anyone else's input. But if your goal is to reach a broader audience or to make money, that requires the interest and participation of other people. So then that does kind of require striking some kind of balance between working within your own creative genius, your own creative zone, and also figuring out what other people want to consume. And I think that can be difficult for a lot of people, especially if you see someone that you consider somehow inferior making a lot of money. And a lot of times, I think it doesn't do any good to get really bitter and angry about what someone else has accomplished, how much someone else's work has connected in the world, because you have no idea what their goals are. You have no idea what their journey was to get there. And you have no idea how fulfilled that thing really makes them. I mean, money is awesome, but maybe they feel exhausted and worn down by the pressure of that work. Maybe they didn't feel creatively fulfilled when they were making it. I think, and again, it's another situation. I feel like I keep saying this, but everyone kind of has to figure out where that balance is for them. Like, how much do you want to do the work to figure out what other people are going to buy? And then how much do you want to kind of reverse engineer your own creative voice to meet that? And I think there's always some trade-off, but there should never be a time when you feel like you're obligated to make.
Oh no.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. I think
Okay.
Alan was talking to somebody else.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Oh gosh, where was I? Oh, I think that if you shouldn't feel obligated to make that trade-off if that's not your creative goal, if that's not your financial or personal goal.
Absolutely. And the thing is, again, so much of this entire process for me, again, this is the third time I've done the book, has been about self-awareness, right? It's about knowing yourself and what your goals are. And maybe the very first thing to do, and maybe I'll put this in my own book in Mindful Creative as I finish it, is maybe the first thing to do is figure out what your goals are. If your goals are to get really amazing at guitar, then by gum, go practice in your bedroom. No one ever has to see you play. But if your goals are to perform, then know that for yourself. Iron that out, figure that out, and get okay with what your goals are. Because I know some of the best guitarists in the world, and I've met some of them, have never played out. I've heard them play, but only like around a bonfire, and they blow me away. But they're not out to gig. It's not what they want to do. It's just not what they want to do. And that's okay, as long as you know yourself and know what you want. But what's interesting to me is, she talks about that you have to acknowledge and mourn the scars that are blocking you from blocks created by overbearing parents or malignant artistic mentors. Honestly, I have to say, I almost wish one of you had taken on hosting for this week, because so much of what I read in this chapter made me roll my eyes. And that's not to say that I didn't have a parent who abused the shit out of me and the police were at our house all the time. And I certainly wasn't allowed to do the artistic things I wanted to do, like sing and dance. I was going to play the violin, God damn it, right? So I get an overbearing parent. I get that those scars might be there. I completely understand where someone might be coming from. But I do have to say that, honestly, if you don't want your artistic dream to die on the vine, then you have to start, right? You have to take a small step. If let's say you want to be a writer, you gather a pen and a sheet of paper, and tomorrow you might write one word. And even if it's just the word okay, the next day you try for 2 words or a line. But you have to start, right? You have to start where you are, but you have to start. And that's sort of the important things. And you can rationalize a teacher was mean to me and told me my art wasn't good. But I'm kind of here to tell you that, like Megan said, it's not about, in some ways, not about you. It's about your goals, right? The world can be cruel. It's sometimes a cruel place, but it's not. I don't know if it's our job to care that much what the world thinks, unless you're trying to be commercial, right? If you're trying to be a commercial artist of some sort, then yeah, maybe you have to care what other people are going to think. But your job at some point as an artist is to make art, and then you'll find your people. And it's funny, I'm talking about Al Petaway a lot tonight. And he gave me a few guitar lessons back in the 90s. And I was talking to him about, at that time I was doing music full time, and I really wanted to become a bigger force of music than I was, blah, blah, blah. And my music is pretty specific. And I said, how do I get the success you and Amy have? How do I get more commercial? And he said, Isolde, keep making the music you're making, and you're going to find your audience. And I went, yeah, that feels right. Because if I had turned my music into something that was more commercial, eventually I would have been really bitter about having to make music that I ultimately didn't like very much. Now, that is not to say that I don't do covers. I love covers. Summertime is one of my favorites. Natural Woman by Aretha Franklin is one of my favorites. I will sing them, no problem, and I love it. But I don't do it anybody else's way but mine, because ultimately, I think in my mind, to be an artist, you have to make peace within your own heart, within your own mind and your own spirit. What are your thoughts on that? We'll start with Megan, if you don't mind, about this notion of mourning the scars in order to become the artist that you could be.
I really think that connects for me to the idea of maybe living up to someone else's expectations for you, or not living up to them, and then figuring out what your own expectations for yourself are. And for me, that's been a really long journey. I think there's a lot of negative messaging an incorrect messaging that artists are given in society just from popular culture. And the idea of like the starving artist, or the miserable artist, or the successful artist versus the true artist. These are all binaries that I think aren't always useful, because the world is a lot more complicated than that, really. And like you were saying, when you have the self-awareness and the maturity to figure out what you actually want, what your goals are, then it won't hurt so much to have someone else kind of poo-poo that, or take like a specific opportunity away from you. You'll be more likely to see other pathways to getting to the bigger ultimate long-term goal that you want. You'll have more perspective on those small losses, because you'll see that that's just one path. It's one way that you can get to the ultimate thing that you want. And one opportunity is never everything. There's always something else. And even if this specific avenue maybe isn't the right creative venue, that doesn't mean that nothing else will be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate your words very much. And that notion of, what is the alternate path? What is another way? I forget who it was who said, yeah, I don't remember if it was Edison or Tesla, was like, yeah, I found 10,000 ways that didn't work before I found the one way that did. But he didn't feel bad about the 10,000 ways that didn't work. Sergio, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I really love that you emphasize that, essentially for me, that you emphasize that it's okay to go at your own pace, right? So 1 page a day, and before you know it, you'll have your screenplay or book. I know some people who even have trouble reading. They say, oh, I want to read more books, but it's hard for me. And I tell them, just read 3 to 5 pages every now and then. And a couple months later, you would have finished that book. So I really love that you emphasize that. And I really agree with what Megan was saying about balancing expectations. I feel like that's really important for all aspects of life, not just your creative efforts. And being aware of that can be instrumental when mourning or dealing with a loss. How do you feel about this, Alan?
Let me think for a second. I'm gonna collect my thoughts.
Go for it.
I get. Let's see. We're talking about. Remind me what we're talking about. I'm stuck. Honestly.
That is
Zelda, can you hit him with the recap?
Sure. We're talking about the notion of mourning the scars that are blocking you, and also still, though, taking even the tiniest actions in the direction of your art. Small steps are still steps, and that it is okay to keep making the art. And you'll find, if you want an audience, you'll find your audience. And if you don't want an audience, that just making the art for the sake of making the art can sometimes be enough.
Yeah. So absolutely. So so part of me was just like excited for this chapter tonight, because I thought it brought us a lot of interesting things about like acknowledging the pain that we've gone through and giving yourself permission to feel bad about that and more in those moments, and to acknowledge these little things. And I think like I definitely agree, like there's like this section in there, Isolde, where it's just answer these very loaded sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's just like did you have the exact same experience? And she does say, did you have the exact same experience as I did, like, but she doesn't say that, but she's like says like, if these don't resonate with you, just write about what you feel. But they were really like like Mad Libs about like just making you fill in the sentence exactly that she wanted you to write, basically. And it was
Yes.
like
Very specific.
okay, that I really had trouble with, but I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to move through this and realize that this is not for me, or I'll see what does come up and what thoughts I have around this. But sort of mining through stuff, doing this process, I've sort of come to revisit some traumas in my creative life that I felt like I just tried to move through. Like I was just like, well, next thing, I'll go to the next thing. It's fine. I can pivot. You know, I'm an artist. I'll find where I fit. And but that wasn't truthful to the pain that it caused me, or to like the depth of hurt I felt in some of those moments of not uh having things go my way, I guess, for to simplify it. um and then the idea that we just take little steps is so key to getting back on it. And like, if you run, you need to just go run a little bit. You know, my dream of running a marathon was always just wake up one day and like sign up for a marathon and go do it. But that's not how you train for a marathon. That's definitely not the best way to do it. You have to like start running, and to write, you have to start writing, and to act, you have to start acting. You have to put yourself out there. And you know, painting, it's all the same stuff. If you don't take pen to page or paint to the canvas, the painting will never emerge because you won't have started it. And I guess earlier we were talking about the phrase, what I was remembering, Isolde, was that, I was talking about how artists that maybe are not as great are being seen more. They're getting work, they're getting jobs that you want, or whatever. Their projects are being are happening. And it reminds me of what you say, Isolde, which is writers write, professional writers finish.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is what that is about. It's like taking those steps. Like, if you're not doing the things, if you're not starting this process, then you'll never get to a point where you're like, can have what you want, can have that goal manifested. And I think some of what this book is trying to do is excavate little some of them may be pebbles, some of them may be like mountains that we're trying to like move around, that have kept us, or kept artists from moving forward with their artistic life. And I think acknowledging those pains and those moments, big and small, is helpful to letting go of them, and acknowledging how they can serve you. Some of it's like, okay, that was very informative. I need to move forward in a different way than I've been doing so far.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your words so much, especially since it brings me right to the next section.
Nice.
Because the next section was gain disguised as loss, right? Like when you do lose, when you do not get the thing published, or when you don't get the part, often there's a lesson in there for you. And that's kind of what I do for myself, right? I had a wonderful acupuncturist named Yumi Zhang, and her thing was, if not this door, another door. And it took me a while to get it, but I totally got it. Absolutely. This might not be the right path for me. And even though I really want it, it might not be, right? So sort of to uncover this gain disguised as loss, kind of ask yourself, how can this loss serve me? And that's what I do personally. I ask, what is this trying to teach me? Because I think there's information in everything. And so what are your thoughts on this notion of sometimes the loss is a real teachable moment for yourself, or a learnable moment? Alan, why don't we start with you, since you had just brought it up?
Yeah, I mean, I found that so useful to sort of think about that as a way to sort of, and it is how I try to often look at life, as like, oh, well, I didn't get this. How do I move forward? What is the lesson I've learned from that? Or just like, yeah, man, I'm all over the place tonight. Sorry.
That's okay.
No, I mean, I think it's important to look at your losses that way, and it's hard. And I think it's important to remind people, like, this is a thing where it's just like, yeah, you may figure that out for yourself, but it's nice when someone says, like, how can you look at this as a way to like restructure or move on, or as it take a step forward, rather than get stuck in the mourning process. If you're not like like mourn, have that moment, but like now what? What's next? So I think that's really important. Sergio, how do you feel about loss being a gain or gain disguised as loss?
Yeah, I really agree with what you're saying. I feel that this is something that is very important. She says that every loss must always be viewed as a potential gain, right? And it's all in the framing. And I agree that being able to reframe that is vital. It's very important. It's easier said than done though, but I do think it's important and it can be difficult. She also says that when we feel those losses, that if the present hurts this badly, we tend to view the future as impending pain, excuse me. And I can agree with that, but it's it's really great to be able to take that loss as a call to action and to ask yourself what happened, what went wrong, or even if it's not something that you did, what can you do to change the outcome next time, or just feel better in the present, and try and turn that into a gain. So I agree that that's very important. How about you, Megan? How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think there does need to be a process a lot of times of moving through those negative stories, if you have them, about like not being talented enough, not being good enough, is it even worth it? That was kind of what I've used that mourning process to kind of move through. And I think hopefully as you mature as a creative like that, you have that can be a shorter process. But I think it's always worthwhile to look at the situation and think, well, what lesson is there in that for me? Like what other opportunity am I not seeing that this supposed failure can lead me to? And I think even in my own life, there's been situations where I've lost even like a job or something like that was devastating at the time, that ultimately spared me something really horrible, or it gave me an opportunity, like space to do something that I never would have been able to do otherwise. There's been so many situations in my own life like that I think that kind of mindset translates really well to creative work, because a lot of times we get stuck on this one specific vision of how we want to realize our creative dream, and we'll get tunnel vision. We'll miss opportunities that might actually be better suited to like the outcome we want in the end.
Yeah.
So
loss can enable growth.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think, Isolde?
I have so many thoughts. Uh-oh.
We'd
So
love to
one
hear them.
one of the things that, this is there are quotes in this section that I kind of went yes, and I put the quotes in. She says, when hit by loss, ask what next, not why me, which I thought was lovely and refreshing. And then she says the key to career resiliency is self-empowerment and choice. Both of those things I am on board with. I am completely on board with, because when one avenue gets blocked, the point for us is to find another one, right? Like what I do for myself in those kinds of situations is when I face a loss, I actually don't even take the time to mourn it right away. Instead, I immediately take one small action in the right direction. Like I will ask myself literally, what is one small thing I can do right now to improve things? And I'm going to give you an example. This is back a long time ago. I was facing essentially eviction. I was out of money. Okay. I was way out of money. And I was facing the choice of buying cat litter and cat food and eating myself. And so I bought cat litter and cat food that March and just didn't eat very much. And what happened was I literally had like $5 for the month. And the folks at the National Geographic went, we're going to go out to dinner, or out to lunch at this Mexican place. We're going to go and it's going to be awesome. And I ordered like chips and salsa, which was like $1.30 at the time. And everybody else was ordering margaritas, because we were saying goodbye to somebody who was leaving. So I had to go. And then when the bill came, they're like, all right, there are 20 of us. Let's split it 20 ways and we're good. And I was like, excuse me? I got chips and salsa. But I was also like 22 years old and did not understand that it was okay to go, what the? No. So I gave them, I gave them my credit card and paid and just overdrew my card because I did not have the wherewithal to go, oh, screw this, I am not doing this. And I was devastated. And so in the moment I was like, I have $4. I have $4 to my name right now. And my way of taking my power back in that moment, I went to a bookstore. I went to the Borders that was just down the street from the National Geographic Society, and I bought a book. I went, you know what? I have $4 left. I'm going to go find a book that costs $3.95, and I'm freaking going to buy it because it's going to make me feel like I am not at death's door. So it might not have been the smartest thing, but I had enough cat litter and cat food to get through the month, and I was going to do something that reclaimed my power, So that's kind of where I am with this, is that sometimes I just have to go, you know what? I'm going to empower myself and just do the thing. And that's when I see the new door. That's when I see the small step taking me into another direction. So that's kind of what I feel like about it. And I get it. I get that's probably anxiety fueling for someone who's like, what the hell? You took your last dollar and you spent it on a book. Spending money on books is never a waste as far as I'm concerned. So yeah,
Yes.
that's kind of where I am with it is, if not this door, another door, if not that door, open a window. Sometimes that's survival. When we look at what's going on in Ukraine, that's exactly what these people are having to do. These are people who have zero fighting experience, and they're still going out and doing everything they can because that's what they have to do. And if that's what you have to do, by gum, you're going to figure out a way to do it. And that's it. That's what you do on the fundamental levels. That's where I am with it. And anxiety might play a role. I might let it play a role later, but in the moment, I am buying that book.
Nice.
So
I
that's
love that. In the
Mic drop
moment,
moment.
buy
Mic drop.
in
Book
the
drop.
moment, buy the book.
That's
Book
right.
Where's the
drop.
book drop?
yes, book drop. But yeah, so that's where I am on it. But let's move on, because otherwise I'm gonna start waxing poetic about my time at the National Geographic. But so she talks about this notion of some artists being addicted to anxiety. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on artists being addicted to anxiety? Anything? Sergio, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this, but I feel like a couple hours in, we've already bashed Julia Cameron a lot this episode, and I swear this isn't the we don't agree with her. Why are we doing the artist way episode? We're very appreciative of this process. I know I am, so I'm sorry to speak for everyone else in that regard. So I guess I'll just quickly say that, yeah, I don't agree. I wrote a WTF for this. I'm someone who suffers from anxiety, which I've talked about before. I've had panic attacks in my youth that were pretty awful, and it's something I still deal with daily. And I don't think that it's because I'm creative or because I'm an artist. I don't think that I would prefer the low-grade pain and occasional heart-stopping panic attack to the drudgery of small and simple daily steps in the right direction, as she put it. That's not how I feel at all. How does the rest of the crew feel? Megan, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually felt really called out by this part. I think as an anxious person, I also have really, really bad anxiety. It's been, it's fluctuated throughout my life, but there's been periods of time when it's been really, really bad, to the point where it was difficult to even function. And I do think that when it comes to low level anxiety, it's, for me at least, and I'm only speaking for myself, it has been really easy to apply that to my creative work in the form of those negative stories about me, about my work, about oh, it's not worth it because I'm just lacking some fundamental piece that I need to really be successful. Therefore, it's not worth even trying. Or the way she talks about the overthinking, that's so what I do. I will decide that I can't apply for this job because I'm already thinking about, well, it's going to be 2 miles away, and like then I'm gonna have to, move, and like I won't even be applying for the job. I'll be like searching for an apartment, and I'll be like thinking about, well, what if I want to get a cat 3 years from now? And I mean, like those are the ways that I will sabotage myself, and it's something I've really had to work through in my life, like to sort of figure out where that comes from, and then sort of get a handle on it to the point where it doesn't stop me from making decisions or making progress. And it's still a struggle that I have. That's always my first instinct, just ruminate and obsess. And that also filters down into my creative work too. Like there's so many infinite possible ways the story could go. And like, what if only one of them is right? And I mean, I know intellectually that's ridiculous. Of course, like there's so many different ways that this story could be great, but letting go of that means letting go of the vision of it being perfect. And as long as I'm ruminating and obsessing and just staying in that place of anxiety about it, then I don't really have to make progress, like it's sort of a way that I keep myself from working exactly the way she described. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm the only person on earth, but like that really resonated with me. And it was interesting the way she wrote about it.
I guess for me, I was just taking it too literal, which I'm finding that I might be doing with certain things she's saying, where it's just like I would not rather choose a panic attack over finishing the short story kind of thing. But I really understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that perspective. Again, I'm sorry to interrupt. Alan, unless Megan, was there any other thoughts you wanted to share on that?
No, I'm good. What do you think, Alan?
I think a lot of the similar things. As soon as you talk to me, my brain just goes, "What, me?" This is great. The anxiety, the addiction to anxiety. I thought. Thanks, Megan, for that insight. I could feel your anxiety messing with your work, and I have sort of not considered myself an anxious person or having a lot of anxiety, and I think what I've come to learn is maybe I had a lot of anxiety that I was just like unacknowledged, and or I let myself give into it without really naming it. I was like, I don't have anxiety. Now I feel like I do. And yeah, it's like, I think you made a good point, Sergio. Maybe we're some of these things that I feel like we're taking a lot very literally, and they're definitely like expressions of how she sees the world, but we have to remember she's a writer, and this is a book, and she in this chapter says that artists are very dramatic at times. And so when she says you'd rather have a panic attack than do the thing, it's not like you would rather, but like the easier thing might be to have a panic attack if you're not set up to do the thing you want to do, because
for me, it's just hard to think that's ever the case as someone who's gone through
yeah
that.
So I don't think
never
it's like
easier to have the panic attack for me.
Well, that's great. And I think it's not like a conscious choice. It's like you're just the way, and the panic attack, I think, is the extreme version of it, but like the anxiety just welling up inside of me is something that resonates with me, to be like, and there's somewhere in this chapter where I was able to break open a little bit of that, and this concept of like letting things go for later. It's almost just the simple idea of like write your rough draft and then edit it, not edit at the same time you're writing it. But like that idea, and I've been starting to contemplate this idea that if I want my show done the way I want to do it, I may have to figure out a way to do it myself. And this is a concept I've started to get anxious about, because I feel like what I want to do is get support and find people who know how to do this and give me that feedback. And then I had this moment where I was imagining talking to another artist who was working, like a set artist who would work on the show, and asking me what I wanted in this moment, and thinking, oh my God, I'll have to figure out what that is. And then I thought, well, maybe in that moment would be the time to figure it out. And maybe you don't need to figure it out right now, since you're imagining a time when someone might come and ask you what you want. So there's already a set up place where that might be the thing to think about. Sure, it may be something I need to think about ahead of that, but I don't have to think about exactly what I want the set to look like right now as I'm writing a script, unless it's key to the script, right? But I can let go of some of these fears, knowing that there'll be another time for me to deal with them. And it might just be the second run of the script, but I don't have to figure everything out in this moment. And that is a process that's helped me write as much as I've written recently, to be like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to have everything figured out. I need to write, and then I can shape from that. I know what I'm writing. I have ideas, and I just need to put them down, and then I can sort of carve out from that material. I don't know.
That's great. No, that's really great. As someone who still struggles with that, I really love hearing that. It's really reassuring. Isolde, how do you feel about this?
I love what you all are saying. I think it's great. Whatever anxiety I have or don't have is never about my art. And that's because if it sucks, it sucks. And that's been my lesson for a lot of this, is for a lot of doing this book, for a lot of my creative life, is that it's okay to suck. Sometimes you're just going to suck, and it's part of the learning process. So what I strive for as far as anxiety and creativity is I strive for beginner's mind, even if it's something that I've been playing violin since I was 5. And I have this expectation in my head that I should be able to play Rimsky-Korsakov Scheherazade, doggone it. And I used to play it, and now if I went back and tried to play it, it would be, a little worse for wear, because my fingers can't do that anymore. And I can judge myself, or I can go, I'm gonna embrace beginner's mind. I'm gonna be approaching this as if I have never done it before, and with a sense of wonder and with a sense of exploration. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing that year-long art piece project, is because is every single one of those a masterpiece that's going to hang in a museum? No, none of them are masterpieces that are going to hang in museums. And that's okay, because I'm allowing myself to suck. I'm allowing myself to have beginner's mind. So I have absolutely no anxiety. And if somebody were to come to me and go, as somebody did, wow, you really do have a lot of things that look like spirograph. And I went, yeah, they really do. And that was it. Like, what if you held a war and nobody came, right? This was one of those moments where he was like, that you just have a lot that looks like spirograph. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really interested in those patterns. And to me, that's what I'm exploring. And to him, it was like, I don't want to see spirograph. And I'm like, then I invite you.
Scroll on by,
Right, exactly. Then I invited him. I'm like, it's, you are welcome to not look. It's totally cool. But I like some of them. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you do. Then come back and look at the ones you like. There's my thing is that I don't want to let somebody, it's like earlier in the book, she says, don't let the bastards get you down. And I really believe that. I think we need to have the grace to be a beginner, and that's what it is for me with these paintings. And it's moving that way into the play I'm writing, into the musical writing, into the books I'm writing, into everything I'm doing creatively. I'm just embracing the opportunity to suck and also to have beginner's mind. So that's my thought. And I realize, by the way, that this is an awfully long chapter. So I am we're chatting, and I appreciate it. And I now come to my my absolute favorite bit of the entire book. And I talk about this with my clients all the time. I quote this, and it is this question: do you know how old I'll be by the time I learn to play the piano? Answer: the same age you will be if you don't. The first time I read that, everything popped. Everything, the gates of heaven opened, and heavenly light shone down on me, and I was bathed in the glory. Because like, what better reason to make art than time is passing? So you can let time pass while you're making art, or you can let time pass while you're not making art. wouldn't it be more cool to be making art? And that's kind of the entire book to me in a nutshell. That all of the other stuff is healing and trappings and this and that. But ultimately, time is passing, and wouldn't it be better to spend it making art? What are your thoughts on this, folks? Megan, let's start with you.
Yeah, to me that's the mic drop moment of the entire book. I think
Yep.
when I read that, it just like yeah, I had a really similar experience. I was just like, wow, because I think when you're kind of an anxious person and a bit of an anxious artist, it can be really easy to talk yourself out of whatever you're doing with those kinds of stories. Like, oh, I'll never be like, I don't have enough time in my life left to be as good as I want to be. And it's never going to, I'm never going to be where I could have been if I'd started 10 years ago. And, you know, maybe not. But the thing is, if you never start that process
Yep.
of moving forward, then you're going to die and you won't have ever done the thing. And the truth is that there is so much you can do at any age to make progress, to learn, to have a different perspective than someone who started when they were 10 maybe wouldn't have. There's no telling what kind of genius you might bring to your craft that never would have been there when you were younger. Like, I think, you know, I'm someone who did write when I was a little kid, but I feel like I'm so much more of an interesting creative now. Like, I have so many more interesting things to say. And I think because I went through so many struggles with that creativity throughout my life, that's given me a perspective I wouldn't necessarily have before. And the older I get, the more dynamic that becomes. And I think, yeah, like I'm also now kind of getting into visual art for the first time. It's something that I've been really afraid of and intimidated by for my entire life. And I did have that thought, like, oh, there are people who've been drawing since they were, 5, and I'm in my 30s now. And I mean, what am I expecting to happen? And really what it comes down to is that I feel compelled to work on this, and of course, if I'd started 20 or 30 years ago, then I'd be in a different place now, but I also wouldn't be me, and I wouldn't be the person now who's starting to express myself in this new way. And if I never start, if I just decide I'm too old, there's no point, then I'll cancel out any opportunity I have to grow in that direction at all. And who's to say, like, if I'm starting to learn drawing now, maybe that will lead me to some opportunity that I never would have imagined, some relationship I never would have had, or anything. I mean, it can lead anywhere if you just remain open to possibilities, and if you don't, think yourself out of those possibilities. So,
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Alan?
No, I think that's great. I think there's like a struggle not to talk yourself out of possibilities, especially like doing new things or whatever. Like a while ago, I just picked up a canvas and painted something. I was like, my friend Elise was like, let's do this, let's paint. And I was like, I guess so. But it was nice to have someone sort of like prompting him, because I don't think of myself necessarily as a visual artist in that way. But I love to draw, and I love to doodle, and I love to like think visually on space. And so it's like, oh, it's not so different from how I like to think. And this is one of those moments where I did just follow what happened, and I ended up liking what I created. And I was like, perfect, that's done. And that's my moment in that. But I felt pleased with the product and my experience. And I was like, all right, that was cool. But I didn't feel like I needed to do that all the time. But I didn't feel like I shouldn't do it. And so it is something to me like, oh, maybe I'll go back to that sometime when I'm feeling sort of in that mode. It's a place I can explore. And I don't know, I think it's just one of those things that trying something new can be often daunting, and I think it's easy to shut down, and pushing through that to give yourself that space to be like, it doesn't matter if you do it or not, but if you do it, you might have fun and you might learn it. And at some point you'll be able to be one of those people who's like, I do this now, I play guitar or xylophone, or I'm a painter. And I have friends who I didn't think of as artists, and I've seen their amazing like pencil sketches and drawings, and they're just like, oh, that's, they posted them on Facebook or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, amazing, that's crazy. It's crazy that they can do that to me, because I'm like, I don't think of them as that kind of artist, and so no one's going to make you do that necessarily, but if you feel that inkling, then I think you have to follow it. Sergio, how do you feel about this sort of situation of being too old to do something?
Yeah, I really agree with what you said earlier about how it can be a struggle, to pursue different possibilities, and even harder when we suffer loss and rejection, like we talked about earlier. But that's who makes us who we are. You're not you without those experiences, right? And I love what Megan said. Without all of this, you'll never be you. I'll never be me, she said, which is beautiful. Keep being you, keep being yourself. And it's never too late, right? I love that summation. We've referenced a lot of many times how Harrison Ford didn't blow up until he was in near his mid-30s, and in this chapter she references a lot of artists and writers and other creative people who didn't become successful, if you will, until their 40s and beyond that. So I feel like it's something we talk about a lot, right? We were just talking about this at the last writing group meeting, and I just really want to say that I wholeheartedly agree with that. We've said it so many times. So please, listener, it's never too late. It doesn't matter how old you are. It is never too late. Please just try, and taking baby steps is perfectly fine.
Totally.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
That's a perfect summation. And one of my favorite things about all of this is Rodney Dangerfield didn't hit until he was 56. This is not to say he was sitting in his basement until he was 56. He just didn't become famous until he was 56. He was working it. He was doing small clubs. He was doing open mics. He was doing the work, right? One of the things that we have to remember about this is the artist's way is a method of getting back to your creativity or rediscovering, recovering your artistic self. You don't do that in a vacuum, right? You actually have to do something. And so the thing, like, we can evade and avoid. We can say we're too old. We can say, that we don't have time. All of that stuff is valid. If you feel you're too old, you are too old. If you feel you're too busy, you are too busy. But if you choose to reprioritize and kind of go, you know what? I don't care if I'm 55. I'm 55, so I'm just going to say that. I don't care if I'm 55. I'm going to start trying to learn how to paint, doggone it. Why not? Who is stopping me? There is no one stopping me. And so one of the sentences that she has in this section that I just loved was, she says, creativity occurs in the moment, and in that moment we are timeless. And that's another sentence in this section, this very challenging chapter that I just absolutely agree with, right? When you are creating, you are in a place and space out of time. And so I want to remind you that it does not matter. Your actual chronological age matters not a whit, as they say in all of the Regency romance novels. It doesn't matter. What matters is your courage and your dedication to making something that did not exist before. And frankly, nothing like you can create will exist anywhere else, because no one has your abilities, your experience, your thoughts, your mind, or your creative genius, whatever it is. No one else can do it. So why not you? That's my thought on all of that.
That's
all right.
Beautiful. I feel like that was another mic drop. So many mic drops. 4 mics tonight.
That's right. We are all holding mics and dropping them regularly. So let's talk about a little bit of this notion of the next section, which she calls filling the form, which is take the next small step instead of a giant leap, right? So for me, and I'll start this real quick, I say break things down into their smallest bits, right? Don't make the tasks or the assumptions of what you have to do so big that you do nothing. That's really daunting. So let's break them down into minutia. You know, today I will find a pencil. Tomorrow I will find a piece of paper. The next day I will draw a single line or a dot. Do something. And that starts the ball rolling, right? And she says another sentence that I love here. She says, fantasizing about pursuing our art full time, we fail to pursue it part time or at all. And so to fill the form, it's to take that next small step instead of trying to do the one giant leap, or to go, oh, you know, I'm going to focus on the fact that I have to have an 80,000 word novel done, instead of going, today I'm going to write 100 words. So filling the form is the today I'm going to write 100 words. And there's a lot of wisdom to it, but I'd love to ask all of you, and I don't know who should start. Maybe Sergio. Sergio, what are your thoughts on the notion of filling the form, perhaps instead of looking at that long-term, more daunting goal?
Yeah, I think that filling the form can be a lot more digestible, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think for me, I'll just say, like, I agree that it can be harder and more daunting if you set this big goal for yourself and don't allow yourself the time to pursue it in the appropriate way, you know, whether depending on where you're at in life and your obligations and priorities and such. And I just want to reiterate, sorry if I sound redundant, but I just want to reiterate that just writing one word, like Isolde said, is all you need. One sentence is all you need to start, right? One page a day is all you need to start that path.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I feel like it's good to try and take what she did in the book, but make it your own. Because some of these prompts that she had, like Alan was saying earlier, I couldn't relate to.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just try and make it your own, like, it's something that we've all been trying to emphasize during this process, especially as Isolde, is you take what works and you leave what doesn't, and you try and create your own kind of path in that way for this process. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. Totally. Megan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, to me, this is such a powerful idea. And I think this is really in my experience, this is the antidote to the part of me that's always ruminating and overthinking. Because when I'm doing that, I'm usually stuck in some really expanded long-term view of the world. And I'm not letting myself focus on those small steps, because in some way those small steps are just scary, or I'm having a hard time breaking it down in some way. So what she talked about is almost exactly how I've sort of worked through that in my own way. Like, a lot of times I will, when I feel myself starting to do that, I will write down the project, and then I'll write down like 8 steps to get to my end goal, and then I'll break it down and I'll break it down until I have just like the teeniest, tiniest, smallest little bit of the thing that I can do. And whenever I don't know what to do, that's always the way forward. It's just to take the next small step and not necessarily focus on where everything is going all the time. So yeah, I thought that was a really powerful part of this chapter, and also like one of the best lessons of the book, I would say.
Awesome. Alan, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree with Megan. I thought, like, more than, because the how old will you be was sort of like a callback, and I thought this was the next step to that. And it's like, you start doing the work and you step up to the plate. And it was so funny to me. I thought there's a couple of good points in this. And she says, it means that when obsession strikes, as it will, about how the damn thing is not any good, you tell yourself that this is a question for later and turn back to doing what is the next right thing. And that means you write the pages of the day. And I was like, oh yeah. And I think that's one of those like aha moments for me, where it's like, yeah, I don't have to worry about all the things that could happen down the road. I don't have to worry about, like, worrying about if I'm going to be able to sell a script is not going to help me write the script. It's going to make me worry about writing the script. But if I write the script, then I can deal with the next step of that, right? And that's scary to
process
be, like,
over product.
Right, process. So you got to sit down and you got to write. And and then she goes on to think, to sort of gives these examples of, like, the drama that we create. And she writes this paragraph, and it's a paragraph that leads into what you quoted, Isolde. She says, creative people, and I thought this was so funny. Creative people are dramatic, and we use negative drama to scare ourselves out of our creativity with this notion of wholesale and often destructive change. Fantasizing about pursuing our art full time, we fail to pursue it part time or at all, which is where you started. But she talks about like this feeling like, oh, to be an artist, I have to destroy my marriage and I have to move to a different city. And there's like no small steps before you get there. It's
A
like,
bit hyperbolic.
yeah, but this is something that resonates with me. The feeling of like, well, until everything changes, it's a great block because like there's so much work to do and sort of like destroying a relationship and moving a million times so that you don't have to focus on your artistic endeavors. Not that that's my life, but it did resonate with me in a way. And I thought this next small thing, the next little thing, the next little step we could take was so sort of helpful to me to just be mindful of like, you don't have to do the whole thing at once, and you can let go and you can sort of set a goal and build towards it. But like, what's the small step you can take right now? What's the next thing you can do in this moment? I thought, yeah, fill the pages, do the forms, start writing. That was to me, yeah, like Megan said, it was like one of the most important things. And it's not like, oh yeah, if you do it, if it's like what is it? If you build it, they will come. You have to start doing it or you'll have nothing. And that's the same thing with learning piano or whatever. Like if you don't start, you don't start, you won't get there.
Right.
Yeah. Isolde, is that everyone?
Yeah. I want to add something though, and this is from my own personal experience. Sometimes, even through all this filling the form stuff and even through all the small stuff, sometimes you have to take a big leap. Sometimes you do. Sometimes in order to get to the next step, that next step is a freaking doozy, right? So for me, back in 2018, I looked at my husband and I said, honey, we have to move to New York City. And he went, excuse me? And I'm like, I have done everything I can in DC. We have to move to New York. It's where I've wanted to be my whole life. Ever since we first immigrated to the USA, we have to move. And he was like, that happened for a long time. And then I told him something that I took a huge leap. And I said, you don't have to go, but I'm going. And he went, well, then I guess we're moving to New York City. And it was a true gamble on my part, but it was something that had to happen, right? In order for me to move to the next step in my journey, and it turns out for him to move to the next step to his journey, we had to be here. We had to be in New York City. So sometimes, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, yeah, it's small steps. You do the work, you put your butt in your seat and you do the work. And sometimes you take a big old leap off a big old cliff, and that's okay too, right? You have to know what your process is, and you have to know what's necessary for you today. And frankly, if you take that big old leap and you go, I need to move to LA and I need to pursue screenwriting full time, doggone it, that's what I'm doing. Then you have to break that down into the tiny steps of putting your house on the market, seeing if there are jobs being a barista, but while you pursue your screenwriting, whatever it is, right? You have to take care of all of those things. But if you decide you need to make a huge change, there's nothing wrong with making a huge change as long as you are cognizant of all of the small incremental changes you'll have to make as you go through this. So that's a lot of this is again, self-awareness.
Yeah, I think like if you're thinking I got to move to LA to be a screenwriter, but you've never written a script, you have time before you need to sell that house. Like maybe right, like I think that's what she's sort of like putting that oh, the only way I'll be able to sell a script is if I'm in LA, but it's not the only way you'll be able to write a script. So you may start there first, or maybe just write anything first, right? And I think that's that sort of like drama thing. Like you've taken a lot of steps, you've done this process several times, and you're very creative. You've established a very creative life for yourself and a way that you operate within the world. And you felt like through that, all that you gained this information. Yeah, you're going to have to take big steps,
Mhm.
and big steps may be coming down the pike, but if you focus on the big steps before you take any of the small steps, then it's like, slow down.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly. And that's what
plug-
she says.
yeah.
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 There's the next section is, obsessing about it rather than doing something about it, contemplating the odds. And that's a lot of
Right.
what this is, right? That's a lot of, Han Solo in Empire Strikes Back tells C-3PO, never tell me the odds, because if you tell me the odds, then I focus on those instead of on doing the thing that I need to do right now. And
That's so smart. Don't tell me the odds. It's a
Yeah.
terrible thing to tell somebody.
never tell me the odds. And I literally have a t-shirt that says never tell me the odds. Because yeah, that's the thing. Personally, again, I'm sharing, tell me if I'm oversharing, but when I came to the realization that I no longer could, even though I had a thriving business, I worked at NASA, I had a thriving business, I was doing all my music there, all my writing there, everything. But I realized that it wasn't going to go past that, right? I was at where I needed to go to the next
Right.
thing, no matter what. And so when you realize that, when you feel like you've done all the work, when you feel like you've actually taken all the steps, and there are no more small steps to take, sometimes it is a big step, sometimes it is a big leap, sometimes you have to just go, this is it. I'm throwing the dice for all the marbles, if you will. And there's something that's really powerful about that, and also a little scary, no question. But if you are at the place where you have to do it, you have to do it. On the other hand, when she's talking about this notion of playing of focusing on the odds, what can we do? What are your thoughts on what can we do to keep ourselves from focusing on the long odds instead of on the daily steps? What are your thoughts? Megan, why don't we go with you first?
Yeah, I almost think we covered this before. Like for me, it's always going back to those small steps. And I think that was a lesson I really had to learn the hard way, because I spent literally years in that ruminating place where all I was thinking about was the odds and all the things I was going to have to do to get to like that big long-term goal, and to really just go back to the basics and take the small steps. I think, a lot of the time I was distracting myself because I was afraid that I would take those small steps and then I would never end up at the big goal. And
Mhm.
but I think something she says in the book is that those are kind of distraction techniques. They're things that you're doing out of fear. And that was definitely the case for me. What do you think, Sergio?
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. I agree that this comes back to just allowing yourself to be okay with taking these baby steps. And also, I've talked about before how when I'm writing something new, before even finishing it, even if it's just a 4-page short story, before I even get to page 2, I'll start rereading and editing. And I think it's just really important to try and not to focus on the odds and just be present and allow yourself to just write or work or create rather, and taking those baby steps and how important that can be, and that baby steps can lead to a giant change in your life. They can be quite transformative in my opinion and in my experience. So yeah, that's how I feel, if that makes sense. Alan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think taking small steps is to me, it feels like unlocking the secret. Like, oh, just break smaller steps, just one step at a time. But the other thing I thought about is thinking about the odds, and the way the odds have affected my life is it's been this sort of situation where it's like, oh, well, it's too hard. You don't want to do this because only so many people get in. And like when I've ever thought about grad school, I was like, oh, I don't want to compete for 8 slots. But it is to me, thinking about it now, it's like barbed wire, right? It's just like a little warning sign, like don't come through here. But it's not like you can't get through barbed wire if you like can snip it or go around it or put a blanket over it. Like there's plenty of things like, so those odds are just like don't look over here. And there's a old, what came to mind, there's a State sketch. I won't call it old, but it's probably old now. I think it was a State, and they were I don't know if you know the State, but
Yeah, that's a great show.
very funny group. And I'll just call the sketch Off Limits, but these guys are in jail, and this new guy just comes into jail, and he says, what's that over there? And it's just like some traffic cones in front of a big old exit out of the jail. And the guy's like to say, oh, and I think it's the warden. He's like, we like to consider that place off limits. And so eventually he just walks right out because there's no stopping him. It was just off limits sign. And to ruin the sketch for you, eventually he feels really guilty and comes back, and then they change the thing like, oh, we never did figure out what happened to you. We poked around for a little bit and then assumed you were dead. But that sketch is so funny. It's just, my family and I would just talk about it all the time. We like to consider that off limits, but there's just this idea of like, don't look over here. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Don't look behind the curtain. Believe in the magic. Believe in the fearfulness of it. Believe in the scary part, and then you won't do it, right? And
Sure.
so it's almost like this little trap to be like, do you really want it? And like, oh yes, and then like you try, and it's still hard. There's still people trying, but you won't get there if you don't try. So I think, don't tell me the odds. Never tell me the odds.
Never tell me the odds. That's right. I love it. All right. Wow. Well, we have chatted about pretty much everything. I would like to talk about the early patternings exercise, which was tough because again, it feels prescriptive, I admit. And also the tasks themselves. And I realized we didn't do a check-in, so maybe we'll do that at the very end. Did anybody have any tasks or this particular early patternings exercise that you wanted to talk about? Because we've covered a lot of stuff in this chapter.
Yeah, I think if it's okay to start, I think that I mentioned earlier that, and I was implying these tasks, that some of the prompts, like Alan said earlier, I couldn't relate to. They were kind of difficult to answer. So I did do it, but it didn't really resonate with me too much. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I would like to talk about a task if that's okay. I know we are
Of course.
going a little long. So task number 3, I really enjoyed the color schemes. Pick a color and write a quick few sentences describing yourself. So I'd like to share what I wrote, if that's okay. It's only a couple sentences.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. So I am light pink, dewy and vibrant, cheerful but calm like a salmon sunset, sexy and fun, all in one. That's it.
I love
Aw.
it.
That's awesome.
Very fun.
Thank you so much.
Good job. Click, click,
So
click,
yeah,
click, click.
task 3 was, thank you, I appreciate that. Task 3 was a fun one for me. Megan, how about you? Would you like to talk about the last exercise in the book before the task or any of the tasks?
Yeah, I the tasks actually took me a few days this week just because it was a lot to kind of process and work through. But my favorite one was definitely the naming the dream one, because I think that really, I mean, I definitely already knew what my dream was, but having to put it down in a sentence was really powerful. And I'll read what it is. I wrote, I want to change the world with my words. And yeah, just
That's
owning
beautiful.
that. I think, yeah, I mean, I already knew that was what I wanted to do, but having to put it down in words and then kind of explore it through the other exercises, I thought that was it was a really interesting experience. I think I go kind of back and forth on the task in the other chapters. I mean, there's always at least one task in the chapter that really resonates with me and kind of pushes me forward. But in this chapter, it seemed like all of them really gave me a lot to dig into. So yeah,
Nice.
how did you feel about the tasks, Ellen?
Yeah, I like this same one. I wanted to talk about this, so I'm glad you brought it up. But the name your dream one, I thought was really nice because it made me sort of have to think about what ultimately I wanted rather than like maybe immediately wanted, or sort of like on a smaller level, like what would I do after I got what I wanted, sort of like thinking about what 5 years from now. I was like, oh, 5 years from now I hope to have done some of this. But it made me think of like, oh, maybe I want what I'm building to grow. I want to build something. It made me feel like, oh, I can really look at it in a different way. And the fact that in the exercise she goes step by step into like making you talk about, all right, this, what would you do 5 years? How would it look 5 years? How would it look like 4 years? And like, what would you do now? And again, like making it that small step of what that little thing you can do right now, or just setting goals. And this is something that hasn't been great, that hasn't been my strength. And it gave me this sort of like sense of possibility, really. And and maybe it did make me feel like stronger, like I could step towards something, starting now that I'm starting to visualize a greater goal than maybe just writing the script, or like where do I want my life to go, and it let me believe in a possibility that maybe I wasn't I feel unwilling to sort of name in this moment, but that I can believe in. It gave me sort of a hope and almost like a faith in myself, to like a map, like where to go, and some steps to get there. And like this idea that, if I think what I want, it's not impossible to get it. If I really think about it, the steps that would get there. And as deeply as I would doubt those things on a blanket level of just like thinking out them outside of a plan, they started to like fit into a plan, and the steps became sort of like visible in a way. Sergio, did you get a chance to talk about this already, or no?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
Thank
you did.
though,
So
for checking in.
I'll toss it back to you, Isolde.
Thanks. I love hearing everybody's. This is so cool and fabulous to hear that this resonated for you. This is one of my most challenging things. I have lots of dreams. That's part of the problem for me. And my life's journey has been how to weave my various dreams into one. And so that one actually resonated with me too, because my dream is to not just create myself, but to inspire other people to find their creative genius, so that then they go out to change the world through kindness and compassion. Like that is, if I'm going to have a big dream, it's not just for me to create, even though that's part of it, but I want to inspire and work with other people to have them also find that, and also want to then take it out into the world and change the world, and really be open to their own creative genius, but also their compassionate genius and their collaborative genius, all of those things. One of my favorite sayings, and I think I've mentioned this before on this during this project, and it is, if you want to go far, go alone. I know, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so that to me is such it's from, I don't know what part of Africa, it's lost in the sands of time, if you will. But if you think about it, like if you want to go fast, yeah, you can go alone and you can sprint ahead. But if what you want to do is go far, if you want to make lasting changes, if you want to achieve great big things, it's best to collaborate. It's best to find the people who you can work with, who you can build something with. And that to me is true beauty. It's like for me, singing is that way. I love to sing, and I can sing solo, and I enjoy singing solo, no problem. But the sizzle for me is when I'm singing in harmony. That is requiring someone else to be there, right? So that's kind of how I feel about that. It needs, in order for me to be truly joyful as a singer, I need harmony. I need to be there with people who are focused on and dedicated to that same goal of making something beautiful and artistic and creative and stunning together. So that's the thing about this one, is that it does call me out to kind of go, okay, Isolde, what do you really want, instead of what you sort of vacuously say you want in this ephemeral way. Alrighty, so let's do the back, at the very back end, the check-in. Did anybody have anything fun and funky happen during their artist date or during morning pages this week? Don't all talk at once.
I did abysmally with my morning pages today. I would just be real. I started them every single day, 7 days, but only one day did I make it to all 3 pages. And I think that just kind of spoke to where I was this week with my mind. I really struggled to find the focus, especially in the morning, to get through them all. And I did my morning pages today, all 3 pages, about like why I think I was struggling with them. So that was definitely a thing. And for my artist date, I ended up not feeling well for a lot of last week when I was kind of off from work, and I had time to do things. So on my very last day, I decided to take a trip to Ellis Island and see the Statue of Liberty. And I had the chance to actually research
Nice.
my relatives who came through Ellis Island, who,
Wow.
you know, I never met them because
Cool.
they died before I left, but I actually got to see, you know, my great grandfather's ship, like a picture of his ship, and like the record of him actually entering this country, and it was just like a really incredible, like emotional moment that sort of connected me
amazing.
back to that part of my roots, and
Wow.
like the
That's cool.
beginning of a piece of my family's American story, which I don't know, it feels important now to remember those things, especially with everything going on in the world right now. Yeah, so whose turn is it next?
I'll go for it if that's
Go for
okay.
it. Absolutely.
So I think that's a really great artist date, Megan, and you were telling us more about that at our last writing group, and I think that sounds like a really fascinating experience, to say the least. As far as my week went, I was able to do all 20 plus pages of my morning pages this week, which I feel good about.
Yay.
And-
Yay.
Thank you. You know, the last few weeks I didn't do that. So that felt cool, although it's definitely okay if you didn't, and not just the crew here, but listener listening, it's okay if you didn't do all 7 days or 20 plus pages. I did want to say that hearing about Megan and Alan and Zolda, you talk about your morning pages recently and how inspiring they've been for you, and how you've been able to start these new creative efforts, or they will make you want to kind of revamp something that you were working on in the past. That's been really inspiring. So today, not consciously, but today in my morning pages, I wrote a little creative passage, which I really liked, and I think I'm gonna maybe keep or turn into something more. And then I also started writing. I just started rhyming, and then it turned into like a rap. Not a good one, because, you know, it was just off the top, free flow, but it was just fun to do that. And as the crew knows, I'm a musician. I also have written for hip hop music and rap in the past. And so that was really fun. And I just want to thank you all for helping motivate my pages and making them more fun in that way. As far as the,
Yeah.
thank you so much. As far as the artist date, this week I did an inside artist date. I did go out to do some stuff, but I feel like some of those things, again, are along the lines of things I typically would do, like the comic shop and such. So I did an inside artist date this week, and I haven't played my my keyboard in over a year. And
Wow.
so yeah, it's been a really long time. And so I got some batteries for it, and I plugged it in, or put the batteries in rather, and I started playing my keyboard, and
Yay.
just played for
Yay.
like over an hour, and started working on a new melody, or I'm not sure if it's going to be a song, but it's been a long time since I've written original music in that way. I've used old music for the YouTube stuff that I have going on, but I haven't written something original in a long time. So I started working on that in my artist date, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm going to continue messing around with the keys, because it's an instrument that I can play a little, but I haven't perfected. Not that I'm trying to perfect, but I have a lot of room for growth. So yeah, I'd like to get back into it. So that was my week, my artist date, my morning pages. Isolda, how about you?
For me, I did my morning pages all 7 days.
Nice.
And and it's the thing about it is that like I'm directing them, right? So in the middle of the morning pages this week, I started writing a speech on this art project that I'm doing, the creative painting a day for a year. And I went, why don't I have a speech about this? So, and then I was using them to revamp the copy in my website. So I'm directing them a little bit. They're not as free flow as they might otherwise be, but I don't care. They're my morning pages. I'll do what I want, right? So a lot of it is that. My artist date was a little weird this week. It was supposed to be yesterday, and it kind of got gloriously subverted when we ended up hanging out. And no, it was fabulous. But it was also the 48th anniversary of my family immigrating to the USA. So what I did in the morning was, and I'm going to treat that as my artist date, is I went through and sort of spent a lot of time thinking about Ukraine and the stuff that's going on there, the horrific conditions people are in. And I'm from the little sort of breaching dolphin-shaped country called Moldova, which is right to the south of Ukraine, kind of almost enveloped by Ukraine. And so what I did is I went through Megan, our artist dates were kind of similar, except for my family didn't come over from Ellis Island. I went through old family pictures, and every year on the anniversary of our Immigration Day, February 27th, I post a memory from that time, from either our time in Israel or in Italy or in Ireland or Romania, something along that journey. And yesterday I wrote up, my artist date was writing up sort of that notion of being from Moldova, which is just south of Ukraine, and my feelings around that, and how I honestly do believe that if Ukraine falls, Moldova will fall in its wake, because it's landlocked and has nothing to recommend it, and isn't even potentially a potential NATO member. NATO didn't want it. EU didn't want it. So it's this tiny little country that has nothing. And it feels very odd to me to be that way. But what I did as my artist date is write that. And then I went through, we don't have many family pictures. We weren't allowed to take many with us when we left. A lot of stuff, you were allowed to take like a suitcase per person, and that's it when you leave. And so we didn't take many family pictures with us, but we have some. So I went through and I sort of looked at these old black and white tattered family pictures that we have from before we left the Soviet Union, before we left Moldova. And I just sort of allowed myself to remember the stories, because not all of them were terrible. I have many terrible stories from, living through the Soviet Union and also being an abused child, but not all of them were. And so I focused on the good times and kind of took myself on an interesting trip down memory lane from when I was 4 and 5 years old.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was a
that's
cool
really
day.
beautiful.
Thank you, Alan. What about you? What was your experience?
So I want to commend you on just looking through that and sort of taking that time, and say congratulations for being here 48 years.
Woohoo!
That's a big day. I feel like we should have made more of a party of it for you yesterday, but it was such an unplanned day. It was very
Next time.
fun. And Sergio, that's really cool. Like your exploration of an old keyboard. It sounds like you're sort of releasing some old magic back into the world.
Oh, thank you. That's really beautiful.
And Megan, I think I missed a lot of this Ellis Island talk yesterday, but that's a really cool thing that you did. I think I may have mentioned this, but my grandmother traced us back to the Minutemen, and I haven't really looked at that information, but I thought that's such a cool sort of way to look at like how long or how we've gotten here and what paths we've taken to get here, and interesting. Now that being said, my artist date was to go get a sandwich.
Awesome.
And I definitely judged it, but what I wanted to do, there's a place nearby and they have like a little counter, and I thought I want to go sit at the counter if it's open and just have a sandwich and a drink and just sit there and take in the moment. And that was my big plan. And I said I'm gonna bring no phone, because at this point everything was terrible and I just wanted to disconnect. I used to do this thing called cell phone free Sundays, and
that's awesome.
and it was such a good feeling, and I don't find myself able to do that now, but I walked away with my no phone. I went to go do this little moment and have my little sandwich and my moment at the counter, just sitting at a counter. I thought that was going to be so romantic or something. And I got there and I ordered, and then you order at like there's a counter, but it's like a sitting at a bar, I guess. But it felt like it's like, it's lunchtime, so I felt like it was a counter. And the guy took my order as he goes to ring it up, and I think, oh, do I need to show my vaccination card? And as I say that, I go to reach for my phone where I keep the Excelsior Pass, and I realize I don't have my phone,
Oh no.
and therefore I don't have my pass. And I was like, oh my God. I said, I don't have it. And he's like, well, and I'm like, well, please, I really just wanted to do this. And I had my heart set on it. And he's like, I can't do anything. He didn't really say that. He was just kind of like looking at me like, what do you want me to do? Like, I was like, I want you to treat me special is what I want. and I was like, I guess I just gotta go outside. And they had like outdoor seating. And what I ended up doing was writing about it. I was very angry. I was like, why am I feeling this need to be a Karen right now? What is this? And I was like, it's not this guy's fault. And even though I was the one that brought it up, he probably felt like if he didn't honor it then, since I brought it up, then he might get in trouble or somebody else might have seen that. So it was like, why would I think that I was so special in this moment that he would just like believe me because I brought it up? But and why would he risk whatever penalties may be out there for him? And whatever the situation is, it's the world we live in. And I was like, had to get over it. But what I ended up doing was drawing like whatever words came into my head. I would just draw a little symbol for them, and I ended up having a nice time, and it was very good. But it was a little bit of processing about why I want to feel special at times where I've done nothing to deserve it. And then in my morning pages, they were a bit of I felt like you, Megan, I felt like sort of like they weren't coming out. They were grinding out. Actually, like I was struggling to make like find any sort of flow in them. And then I think one day I was just like, well, I did a page and a half. Maybe I'll come back. But part of me was like, well, finally I'll get to say like I did half a page or half a morning pages with you guys, because you guys have been dropping halves here and there. So I was like, you know what? I came back to it in the afternoon. I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to drop my half. But then I found like a mysterious day that I didn't know I didn't do. And I ended up doing like 5.5 days total. And I was like, why did I do this day? But yeah, I struggled, and it's been an interesting, terrible week on some fronts, and then good in other ways. And why me? No. I'm good. Isolde?
Wow. Yeah, that kind of like, you have to show it can derail the most the most ardent ardent plan. Wow, cool. Yeah, as I said, oh, my brain. I'm using the morning pages for what I need them for. I'm happy that I'm in the USA. I love this country, and that's that. Is there anything else anybody else would like to do or say before we close for the night?
I just want to thank.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Alan. I just
Go
wanted
for
to
it.
thank you and Megan and Isolde, as always, for such a great time. I'm really loving this journey and this experience, and I don't know if I could have done it without all of your invaluable support. Thank you so much. Thank you, listener, for listening. I hope things are going well. Please let us know how you're doing. Please, if you can, review the show and check out all the information in the descriptions. And yeah, thank you. I hope everyone keeps enjoying this journey with us.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Megan, did you have any closing thoughts?
Well, yeah, I just want to reiterate what Sergio said. I'm glad everyone is. Thank you all for sharing and being so candid. And I think this was a really good conversation. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where we all go in this journey as we support each other and anyone listening.
Awesome. Well, I am super grateful Alan, did you have something to say extra? Or?
Oh, no extra. Thank you guys. Thanks
Okay.
for having me. It's been fun.
Awesome. Thank you and good night. Yeah, I will echo everybody's words about what a great conversation this was tonight. And this is a tough chapter. It's long, it's challenging, it can be arduous, but it also has, as I said, my very favorite mic drop moment of the entire book. There's no time like the present because time will just keep going. So you might as well be making the absolute best of it. That's the way I look at it. And I am super grateful to Sergio, to Megan, and to Alan for joining me on this wacky project where we're essentially live podcasting our experience with The Artist's Way. When I first had this idea, there was a part of me that went, oh, that's crazy. And then the other part went, it's so crazy, it just might work. And with Sergio and Megan and Alan, it is working beautifully. So I'm really grateful to the three of you for undertaking this project with me. Next week, we are going to be talking about recovering a sense of compassion. That is week 9 in this 12-week process. I'm excited about this because compassion to me is sort of one of the hallmarks of us, of people, of humans, of humanity, is compassion. If you have compassion, just about anything else is possible. So I'm super excited to work on that chapter next week. And in the meantime, as Sergio said, if you have questions, if you have thoughts and ideas, our IG accounts are going to be in the show notes, as well as the Multiverse Odyssey and Megan's new page poem and Alan's TaskRabbit and my various socials and things. If you have need of any of us, you know how to find us. And if you want to support the podcast in a way that would be financially remunerative, I would love it if you'd buy me a cup of coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/IsoldeT and buy me a coffee. I like my lattes with oat milk and a shot of sugar-free vanilla, just so you know. All right, cool. Until next time, I send you all of my love, and I'd, on behalf of Sergio, Megan, and Alan, say thank you, good night, and remember to always be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2021. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, remember to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind.